A woman's scream cut through the howling blizzard as she collapsed onto the frozen platform of Cheyenne Station. Clara Whitmore, the disgraced nurse who'd lost everything fighting back against a powerful man's assault, was minutes from freezing to death in the Wyoming wilderness. Then, through the wall of snow, a black stallion emerged carrying the most dangerous rancher in the territory. What happened next would spark the scandal of 1887 and change the frontier forever. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The wind didn't just blow, it attacked. Clara Whitmore pressed her back against the wooden wall of Cheyenne Station, her medical bag clutched against her chest like a shield that couldn't possibly protect her from what was coming. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the last hour. Her fingers had gone numb inside her thin gloves somewhere around sunset. Now, as full dark settled over Wyoming territory, she could barely feel her feet. The platform was empty. The station master had locked up and gone home 2 hours ago, right after telling her there wouldn't be another train until morning, if the tracks didn't freeze over completely. He looked at her threadbare coat and the desperate exhaustion in her eyes, then shrugged and walked away into the storm. That was the West. Nobody owed you anything out here. Clara's teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. She thought about the telegram that had brought her here, crumpled now in her coat pocket. Frontier Hospital seeking nurse, room and board provided. Respond immediately. She'd scraped together her last $15 for the train ticket west, only to arrive and discover the hospital had burned down 3 weeks ago. The telegrapher had forgotten to send word. Stupid, she whispered to herself, her breath forming ice crystals in the air. So goddamn stupid. Back in Philadelphia, they'd called her other things: whore, liar, troublemaker. All because Dr. Marcus Holbrook, respected surgeon, married father of 3, pillar of the community, had cornered her in the supply room and put his hands where they had no right to be. When she'd shoved him away and threatened to scream, he'd smiled, actually smiled. Who do you think they'll believe? He'd asked. Turned out, not her. Within a week, she'd been fired from Pennsylvania General Hospital. Within 2 weeks, every hospital in Philadelphia had heard she was unstable and made inappropriate advances towards senior staff. Dr. Holbrook's version of events spread like cholera through the medical community. Clara's 15 years of nursing experience meant nothing. Her spotless record meant nothing. The word of a powerful man crushed everything. So she'd run. Bought a ticket on the first train heading anywhere but east and ended up here, freezing to death on a train platform in the middle of nowhere because even her escape plan had fallen apart. Clara tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She caught herself against the station wall, wood splinters digging into her palm through her glove. The pain felt distant, like it was happening to someone else's hand. That scared her more than anything. She'd seen frostbite before, knew what happened when flesh froze and died. In another hour, maybe less, she'd lose fingers, toes. If she was lucky, someone would find her body before spring. The thought made her angry. After everything, after fighting so hard just to survive in a world designed to destroy women like her, she was going to die alone on a train platform because she'd trusted a goddamn telegram? No, she said out loud, her voice barely audible over the wind. No, I didn't come this far to freeze. She forced herself to move. One step, then another. Her medical bag banged against her hip. It was heavier than it should be. She'd packed extra supplies, thinking she'd be starting work at a real hospital. Morphine, surgical thread, bandages, all useless now. The station had a small covered area with benches where passengers waited for trains. Clara stumbled toward it, hoping the roof might provide some shelter from the worst of the wind. Her foot caught on something, probably ice, and she went down hard, landing on her knees. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. For a long moment, she just knelt there in the snow, unable to make herself get up. The wind screamed around her. Her dress was soaked through. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. This is how it ends, she thought. Not with dignity, not surrounded by people who love you, just alone in the snow, too tired to stand. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. At first, Clara thought she was hallucinating. The cold did that sometimes. Made you hear things that weren't there, see things that couldn't be real. But the sound grew louder, cutting through the howl of the storm. Heavy, rhythmic, getting closer. She lifted her head. Through the curtain of falling snow, a shape emerged. Large, dark, moving with purpose through conditions that should have made travel impossible. A horse, a massive black stallion, steam rising from its flanks, ridden by a man in a heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. The rider spotted her. She saw him straighten in the saddle, then spur his horse forward. Within seconds, he'd reached the platform and was swinging down from the stallion's back. "Jesus Christ," he said. His voice was deep, rough-edged. "How long have you been out here?" Clara tried to answer, but her jaw wouldn't cooperate. The chattering had stopped. Not a good sign. She managed to shake her head. The man crouched in front of her. He was big, she realized. Broad shoulders, weathered face, dark eyes that studied her with an intensity that should have frightened her. But Clara was too cold to be frightened, too far gone to care about propriety or stranger danger or any of the rules that governed women's behavior back east. "Can you stand?" he asked. She shook her head again. "Can you talk?" "Cold," Clara managed. It came out as barely a whisper. The man didn't hesitate. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate, shocking, almost painful against her frozen skin. Then he scooped her up like she weighed nothing, medical bag and all. "Wait," Clara tried to protest, but her body had other ideas. The moment he lifted her, every muscle went limp. Her head lolled against his chest. He smelled like leather and smoke and horse. Familiar smells, working smells. Not like the cologne-drenched doctors back in Philadelphia. "I've got you," the man said. "Stay with me now. Don't close your eyes." He carried her to his horse and somehow managed to mount while still holding her. Clara felt herself being positioned in front of him, his arms coming around her to grip the reins. The stallion shifted beneath them, responding to commands she couldn't hear. "Where?" she tried to ask. "Hotel," he said shortly. "The Drover's Rest. Best place in Cheyenne. We'll get you warm." Through her haze, Clara processed that information. The Drover's Rest wasn't a place for someone like her. It was where cattle barons and railroad executives stayed. She'd passed it earlier, 3 stories of brick and glass, with electric lights and a doorman. Rooms cost more per night than she'd made in a week back in Philadelphia. "Can't afford," she started. "Didn't ask if you could," the man cut her off. "Now shut up and conserve your energy. We've got 2 blocks to ride, and you're half frozen already." The horse moved forward. Clara felt the man's arms tighten around her, holding her secure as they pushed through the storm. Snow pelted her face. The wind tried to tear her away, but the stranger's grip never faltered. She should have been terrified. Every rule she'd ever learned about proper behavior, about not trusting strange men, about protecting her reputation, all of it screamed that this was dangerous. But Clara's reputation was already destroyed. And besides, the alternative was freezing to death alone. She'd take her chances with the stranger. The ride to the hotel felt like it lasted hours, though it could only have been minutes. Clara drifted in and out of awareness. At some point, she realized they'd stopped. The man was dismounting, pulling her down with him. Then they were moving again, up steps, through a door. Warmth hit her like a physical blow. Clara gasped, her lungs burning. "I need a room," the man was saying. "Best one you've got. And send someone for Dr. Phillips. Now." "Mr. Mercer?" a shocked voice responded. "Sir, is she, She's half frozen. Move." Mercer. The name registered dimly. She'd heard it somewhere. On the train, maybe. Or at the station. Mercer. Something about cattle. Something about, "Sir, with respect, we have policies about—" "I don't give a damn about your policies, Howard. This woman needs help, and she needs it now. You gonna make me say it twice?" There was a pause. Then, "No, sir. Of course not. Room 12, top floor. I'll have Mary draw a hot bath immediately." Clara felt herself being carried again, this time upstairs. Lots of stairs. Her head spun. When they finally stopped, she heard a door open, felt herself being laid down on something soft. A bed. An actual bed with real sheets and blankets. She tried to sit up. Can't pay." A hand pressed her shoulder, gentle but firm. "Already told you. Didn't ask." Clara forced her eyes open. The man, Mercer, was standing over her, his dark eyes studying her face. Up close, she could see the lines around his mouth, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow. the day's worth of stubble on his jaw. He looked like he'd lived hard and expected to keep living hard, probably in his mid-30s, though the frontier aged people fast. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Cole Mercer," he said. "Own Iron Ridge Ranch, about 40 miles north of here." The name clicked. Iron Ridge, the biggest cattle operation in Wyoming Territory. She'd heard about it on the train. Some banker had been complaining about how Mercer controlled half the territory's beef supply, how he'd driven smaller ranchers out of business, how he was ruthless as they came. "Why?" Clara's voice cracked. "Why help me?" Cole's expression didn't change. "Because you were dying on a train platform, and I'm not the kind of bastard who rides past that." A knock at the door interrupted them. A woman entered carrying armfuls of towels and blankets, followed by another woman with a steaming kettle. They both stopped dead when they saw Cole. "Mr. Mercer," the first woman said, her eyes wide. "We didn't expect, that is, we thought—" "Mary," Cole cut her off. "This woman needs warming, slowly. Hot bath, warm drinks, extra blankets. Dr. Phillips is on his way. I want you to stay with her until he arrives. Understand?" Mary nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Of course." Cole looked back at Clara. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, concern maybe, or calculation. She couldn't read it. Then he turned toward the door. "Wait," Clara called out. I don't even know your first name." He paused. "Cole. I'm Clara, Clara Whitmore." "I know." She blinked. "How?" "Found your papers. Fell out of your bag when I picked you up." He pulled a folded envelope from his pocket and set it on the bedside table. "Pennsylvania General Hospital. Trained nurse. 15 years experience." His eyes met hers. "That true?" Clara's throat tightened. "Yes." "Good." Cole adjusted his hat. "We'll talk when you're warmed up. Got questions for you." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Mary moved into action immediately, helping Clara out of her frozen clothes with practiced efficiency. The other woman, younger, maybe 16, drew a bath in the adjoining room, testing the water temperature carefully. "Not too hot, Annie," Mary instructed. "She's got frostbite. We warm her too fast, she'll lose fingers." Clara wanted to tell them she knew that. She was a nurse. She understood how to treat hypothermia. But her jaw still wouldn't cooperate properly. She let them work, too exhausted to fight. The bath helped. Slowly, painfully, feeling returned to her extremities. Clara gritted her teeth against the burning sensation as her fingers thawed. When she could finally speak clearly, she asked Mary the question that had been nagging at her. "Who is he? Really?" Mary looked up from where she was laying out a clean nightgown. "Mr. Mercer? He owns Iron Ridge Ranch, biggest cattle operation in 3 territories. Some say he's the richest man in Wyoming." "Why would a man like that be riding through a blizzard at night?" "Can't say for certain," Mary said carefully, "but I heard he came into town for a meeting with the railroad. Was supposed to stay the night, but something spooked him. Decided to ride back to the ranch despite the storm." She paused. "Lucky for you he did." Annie, the younger woman, couldn't contain herself. "Is it true? Are you really a nurse from back east?" "Annie," Mary said sharply. "What? Everyone's already talking about it. Mr. Mercer himself carrying a strange woman into the Drover's Rest, paying for the best room, ordering Dr. Phillips around like—" "That's enough," Mary cut her off, but Clara saw the truth in both their faces. This was already a scandal. By morning, everyone in Cheyenne would know about the mysterious Eastern woman and the powerful rancher who'd rescued her. Clara closed her eyes. Of course she couldn't escape her ruined reputation, even out here. Different town, different scandal, same result. People whispering, judging, assuming the worst. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," she said quietly. "I was just waiting for a train." Mary's expression softened. "I believe you, honey. And whatever Mr. Mercer's reasons, I've known him 10 years and he's never brought a woman here before. Never shown interest in much of anything except cattle and land." She helped Clara out of the bath and into the nightgown. "Something about you caught his attention. Question is, what?" Clara didn't have an answer. Dr. Phillips arrived 20 minutes later, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the harried look of someone who'd been dragged out into a blizzard against his will. He examined Clara thoroughly, checking her fingers and toes for serious frostbite, listening to her lungs for signs of pneumonia. "You'll live," he said finally, "though you came damn close to not living. Another hour out there and we'd be planning a funeral instead of recovery." He pulled out a bottle of medicine. "Take this tonight. It'll help with the pain as sensation returns. Mary will bring you something to eat. Stay in bed for at least 2 days. And for God's sake, don't go outside again without proper winter clothes." "I don't have proper winter clothes," Clara admitted. Dr. Phillips frowned. "Well, you'd better get some before you leave this room. This is Wyoming in January. You dress like that again, you'll die. Simple as that." He left, still muttering about damn fool Easterners who didn't respect the frontier. Mary brought Clara soup and bread, staying to make sure she ate. When she finally left, promising to return in the morning, Clara found herself alone in the finest hotel room she'd ever seen. Electric lights, hot running water, a bed so soft she sank into it like a cloud. Through the window she could see the storm still raging, snow piling up in the streets below. She should sleep. Her body desperately needed rest. But Clara's mind wouldn't stop racing. Cole Mercer had saved her life. That much was clear. But why? What did he want? Men like him, powerful, wealthy, used to getting their way, didn't do things out of simple kindness. There was always an angle, always a price. And he'd mentioned having questions for her, about her nursing experience. Clara pulled the envelope he'd left on the bedside table. Inside was the letter of recommendation from Pennsylvania General, written before everything fell apart, before Dr. Holbrook had destroyed her. It praised her skills, her dedication, her steady hand in crisis situations. It was also signed by Dr. Holbrook himself. The irony made her want to laugh. The man who'd ruined her had also provided the credentials that might save her, at least temporarily. She set the letter aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she'd figure out what Cole Mercer wanted. Tomorrow, she'd plan her next move. But tonight, for the first time in months, she was warm, safe, fed. It wouldn't last. Clara had learned that lesson too well. Good things never lasted for women like her. But she'd take this moment anyway, hold it close, remember what it felt like to not be fighting just to survive. Outside, the blizzard raged on. Bammed. Cole Mercer stood at the bar of the Drover's Rest, a glass of whiskey in his hand that he hadn't touched. The bartender, a man named Jim who'd worked there for 20 years, was studiously avoiding eye contact. Smart man. Cole knew what people were saying. He could hear the whispers every time someone walked past. The great Cole Mercer, who hadn't looked twice at a woman since his wife died 7 years ago, had carried a stranger into the finest hotel in Cheyenne and set her up in the best room, paid for everything himself, ordered the staff around like she was someone important. The rumors would be vicious by morning. He didn't care. What he cared about was the letter he'd found in Clara Whitmore's medical bag. Pennsylvania General Hospital, 15 years of nursing experience, surgical assistance, emergency medicine, midwifery, everything he needed, everything Iron Ridge Ranch desperately needed. Cole had been searching for 3 months, ever since Tommy Brennan had died from an infected wound that any competent medical professional could have treated. Ever since he'd watched a 19-year-old cowboy suffer for 6 days before finally succumbing to blood poisoning because the nearest doctor was 40 miles away and wouldn't come out to a ranch for any amount of money. He tried hiring doctors. They wouldn't come. Too isolated, they said. Too dangerous. Too far from civilization. He tried hiring nurses. None of them lasted more than a week. Ranch life was too hard, too rough. They wanted soft beds and civilized company, not bunkhouses and cowboys with broken bones. But Clara Whitmore hadn't looked soft. Half frozen and desperate, sure. But when he'd lifted her, when he'd looked into those eyes, he'd seen something else. Steel, determination, the kind of strength that came from surviving things that should have broken you. Plus, she was running from something. Cole knew that look, knew the way people moved when they were trying to escape their past. Which meant she might be desperate enough to accept his offer, if he could convince her. "Mr. Mercer?" Cole turned. Mary stood at his elbow, her expression carefully neutral. "The lady's settled for the night," Mary reported. "Dr. Phillips says she'll recover fully. No permanent damage." "Good." Mary hesitated. "Sir, if you don't mind my asking, what exactly are your intentions with Miss Whitmore?" Cole raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold question, Mary." "I know, sir, but the girl's alone, vulnerable, and people are already talking. I just want to make sure." I'm not planning to seduce her, if that's your concern, Cole said flatly. I have a business proposition. That's all. What kind of business? The kind that's none of yours. But his tone softened slightly. She'll be safe, Mary. You have my word. Mary nodded slowly. Your word's always been good, Mr. Mercer. I'll hold you to it. She left. Cole finished his whiskey in one swallow and headed for the door. He'd return tomorrow once Clara had recovered enough to talk properly, once he could make his offer. He needed a nurse for Iron Ridge Ranch, someone who could handle emergencies, treat injuries, keep his men alive during the brutal frontier winters when doctors were too far away to matter. And Clara Whitmore needed a fresh start, somewhere far from whatever she was running from. It was a fair exchange. Practical. Simple. So why did his hands still remember the weight of her in his arms? Why did he keep seeing those eyes, equal parts terrified and defiant, even as she'd been half dead from the cold? Cole shook his head. Didn't matter. Couldn't matter. He'd learned that lesson 7 years ago when Sarah died, taking their unborn child with her. Love was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. Love made you vulnerable, made you weak. Better to stick with business. Better to keep things transactional. He stepped out into the blizzard, the cold hitting him like a wall. His horse waited, patient despite the weather. Cole mounted and turned north toward the ranch. Tomorrow, he'd make his offer. Tomorrow, everything would change. He just didn't know how much. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The blizzard, the stranger on horseback, the warmth of this room. She sat up carefully. Her fingers hurt, but they all moved. Her toes ached, but there was no blackening, no signs of serious frostbite. She'd been lucky. Incredibly, impossibly lucky. A knock at the door. Miss Whitmore, I've brought breakfast. Mary entered carrying a tray loaded with eggs, toast, bacon, and fresh coffee. Real coffee, not the watered-down substitute Clara had been living on for months. The smell made her stomach growl. How are you feeling? Mary asked, setting the tray on the bedside table. Sore, but alive. Clara reached for the coffee. Thank you for everything last night. Don't thank me. Thank Mr. Mercer. He's the one footing the bill. About that, Clara started. He'll be by this afternoon to talk to you, Mary interrupted. Said he has a proposition. Until then, you're to rest and eat. Doctor's orders. Clara wanted to argue, to insist she couldn't accept charity from a stranger, that she needed to figure out how to pay him back. But the truth was, she had nothing. No money, no prospects, no plan beyond survive today and worry about tomorrow later. So she ate the breakfast. Let Mary bring her new clothes. Proper frontier clothes, heavy wool and sturdy boots, nothing like the thin Eastern dress she'd arrived in. Spent the afternoon staring out the window at Cheyenne, watching people move through snow-cleared streets, wondering what the hell she was going to do next. Cole Mercer arrived at exactly 3 o'clock. Clara heard his footsteps in the hallway, heavy, purposeful, before the knock came. Miss Whitmore, it's Cole Mercer. May I come in? Clara straightened, suddenly nervous. She'd spent the whole day trying to prepare for this conversation, but she still had no idea what he wanted. Yes. He entered, removing his hat as he did. In daylight, Clara could see him more clearly. Mid-30s, like she'd guessed. Tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", broad shoulders that came from actual work, not gymnasium exercises. Dark hair going gray at the temples. A face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so hard. But it was his eyes that caught her. Dark brown, almost black, and intensely focused. Eyes that missed nothing. You look better, he observed, taking the chair across from her bed without asking permission. I'm alive, thanks to you. You would have died if I hadn't found you. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. Yes. Cole nodded, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. Tell me about Pennsylvania. Clara's stomach dropped. You're running, Cole said bluntly. I've seen enough runners to recognize one. Question is, what from? Law, debt, a man? Pride made Clara want to lie. Caution made her want to deflect. But something about Cole Mercer's directness cut through all of that. A man, she said quietly, but not the way you're thinking. Explain. So she did. She told him about Dr. Holbrook, about the assault, about how her word meant nothing against his reputation. She told him about losing her job, her career, everything she'd worked for. Told him about the telegram that had brought her west, only to find the job didn't exist. Cole listened without interrupting. When she finished, his expression hadn't changed. "They believe him?" he asked finally. "Everyone believed him." "You fight back? File a complaint?" Clara laughed bitterly. "With who? The hospital board where he's been a member for 15 years? The medical society where he's a founding member? There is no fighting back when you're a woman," Cole finished. "Yeah, I know how that works." Something in his tone made Clara look at him closer. "You do?" "My wife," Cole said shortly. "Sarah. She died 7 years ago. Childbirth complications. Doctor in town said she was hysterical, that her pain wasn't real. By the time I got a real physician out to the ranch, it was too late. She bled out. Took our baby with her." The words were flat, emotionless, but Clara heard the rage underneath. "I'm sorry," she said. Cole shrugged. "Point is, I know what it's like when doctors decide someone doesn't matter. When they're more interested in protecting their reputation than doing their job." He leaned forward. "So here's my proposition. Come work for me." Clara blinked. "What?" "Iron Ridge Ranch, 40 miles north of here. I've got 40 men working cattle full-time, more during roundup season. Dangerous work. Men get hurt, get sick, get bit by rattlesnakes or kicked by horses or crushed during stampedes." His eyes locked on hers. "I need someone with medical knowledge. Someone who can handle emergencies when the nearest doctor is hours away. Someone who won't fall apart when things get bloody." "You want me to be a ranch nurse?" "Exactly." Clara's mind raced. "I don't know anything about ranching, about frontier medicine, about—" "You know how to treat injuries, how to fight infection, how to save lives. That's what matters." Cole pulled a piece of paper from his coat. "I'm offering room and board plus $50 a month. That's more than most cowboys make. You'll have your own cabin, privacy. And you'll be far enough from Pennsylvania that nobody there will ever find you." $50 a month. Clara hadn't made that kind of money even at the hospital. And a fresh start, somewhere nobody knew about her past. "Why?" she asked. "Why me?" "Because you're desperate enough to say yes. Because you have real experience, not some 6-week training course. And because—" Cole hesitated. "Because you survived something that should have broken you. Out here, that matters more than credentials." Clara looked at the contract he'd placed on the table. It was straightforward, no hidden clauses. 1-year commitment. Medical care for ranch personnel. Living arrangements provided. "What if I can't do it?" she asked quietly. "What if ranch life is too hard?" "Then you leave. Simple as that." Cole stood. "But I don't think you're the kind of person who gives up easy, Miss Whitmore. If you were, you'd have frozen to death last night instead of fighting to stay alive." He was right. Clara knew he was right. But still, the fear lingered. Fear of failing again. Fear of trusting another powerful man who might turn on her. "I need to think about it," she said. Cole nodded. "You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, I'm riding back to Iron Ridge with or without you." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Whatever happened in Philadelphia, whatever that bastard doctor said about you, it doesn't matter out here. West of the Mississippi, people care about what you can do, not who you used to be. You prove yourself useful, you'll be respected. It's that simple." Then he was gone. Clara sat alone in the hotel room, staring at the contract. A year ago, this would have seemed insane. Riding off to an isolated ranch with a stranger, living among cowboys, treating injuries in conditions that would make any Eastern hospital blanch. But a year ago, she'd had a career, a reputation, a future. Now she had nothing except this offer. She thought about Pennsylvania, about Dr. Holbrook's smug smile, about the hospital board members who'd refused to even hear her side of the story, about the women who'd whispered behind her back, calling her a liar, and worse. Then she thought about Cole Mercer's words. West of the Mississippi, people care about what you can do, not who you used to be. Could that be true? Could she really start over? Clara picked up the contract and read it again, then again. Looking for the trap, the hidden price, the catch that would reveal this was too good to be true. But there was nothing. Just a straightforward offer from a man who needed medical help and was willing to pay for it. She thought about Tommy Brennan, the 19-year-old cowboy Cole had mentioned, dead from an infected wound, a wound she could have treated, a life she could have saved. How many more would die if she said no? How many men would suffer because she was too afraid to take a risk? Clara set the contract down and walked to the window. The sun was setting over Cheyenne, painting the snow-covered streets gold and pink. Beautiful, harsh, unforgiving, like the man who'd saved her life. She made her decision. The next morning, Clara waited in the hotel lobby with her medical bag and her new frontier clothes. Cole arrived at dawn, leading a second horse, a sturdy mare that looked patient and reliable. "You came," he said. "I did." "You're sure?" Clara thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about dying alone on a train platform, her life amounting to nothing but a cautionary tale. "I'm sure," she said. Cole helped her onto the mare. His hands were careful, respectful, not like Dr. Holbrook's grabbing, invasive touch. Clara noticed, appreciated it. They rode out of Cheyenne as the sun rose, heading north into country that got wilder with every mile. Clara had never been on a horse for more than an hour. By noon, every muscle in her body ached, but she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop. Cole noticed anyway. "We'll rest at Bitter Creek," he said. "Another hour." "I'm fine." "You're not, but you're tougher than I expected." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "Most Eastern women would have quit by now." "I'm not most Eastern women." "No," Cole agreed. "You're not." They rode in silence after that. Claire used the time to study the landscape. Endless plains, distant mountains, a sky so vast it made her feel impossibly small. Everything was different here, harsher, more honest somehow. When they finally reached Iron Ridge Ranch just before sunset, Claire's breath caught. The ranch sprawled across a valley like a small town. Barns, corrals, bunkhouses, storage buildings, all arranged with military precision. Hundreds of cattle dotted the distant fields. And the main house sat on a slight rise, a two-story structure built from local stone and timber. It was an empire. Cole Mercer's empire. "This way," Cole said, leading her not to the main house but to a small cabin set slightly apart from the other buildings. "Your quarters." Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A bed, a table, a stove. Not luxury, but miles better than the boarding houses Clara had been living in back east. "Supplies are in the barn," Cole continued. "If you need anything medical-wise, make a list. I'll have it brought up from Cheyenne." He paused. "The men will test you. They won't believe a woman can do the job. Prove them wrong fast and they'll respect you. Take too long and they'll make your life hell." "Understood." Cole studied her for a long moment. "Last chance to change your mind, Miss Whitmore." Clara set down her medical bag and met his eyes. "I don't change my mind, Mr. Mercer. I made a deal. I'll keep it." Something shifted in Cole's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then welcome to Iron Ridge Ranch, Nurse Whitmore. Try not to die on me." He left. Clara stood alone in her new cabin, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Somewhere, cowboys laughed. Horses whinnied. A dog barked. She'd done it, left everything behind and gambled on a new life in a place that couldn't be more different from Philadelphia if it tried. Tomorrow, she'd start proving herself. Tomorrow, she'd face the men who wouldn't believe a woman could save lives on the frontier. But tonight, Clara Whitmore allowed herself one moment of something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Clara's first real test came at 4:30 in the morning, 3 days after arriving at Iron Ridge. Someone was pounding on her cabin door hard enough to shake the frame. She jolted awake, heart racing, fumbling for the lamp in the darkness. "Nurse, we got a man down!" She threw on her clothes and grabbed her medical bag, not bothering with her hair. When she yanked open the door, a young cowboy stood there, maybe 20 years old, his face pale in the pre-dawn darkness. "What happened?" Claire demanded, already moving. Horse rolled on Jimmy Tate during the night watch. His legs busted bad. Real bad. The kid was practically running to keep up with her. "He's in the bunkhouse, been screaming for an hour." The bunkhouse was chaos. 20 men crowded around a bunk in the corner where a cowboy lay writhing, his right leg bent at an angle that made Clara's stomach turn. Compound fracture. The bone had broken through the skin. "Move!" Clara ordered, pushing through the crowd. Nobody moved. They just stared at her. I said, "Move." She raised her voice, channeling every ounce of authority she'd learned in 15 years of hospital work. "Now!" This time they shifted, creating a narrow path. Clara knelt beside Jimmy Tate, who was maybe 30, drenched in sweat and barely conscious. The break was about 6 inches above the ankle. Blood soaked through his pants where the bone had torn through. "Someone get me hot water and clean rags," Clara said, opening her medical bag. "And I need 3 strong men to hold him down. This is going to hurt." "Hold on now," a gruff voice said. Clara looked up to see an older man with a gray beard and suspicious eyes. "You sure you know what you're doing? Maybe we should wait for the doc from town." "The doctor from town is 40 miles away," Clara said flatly. "By the time he gets here, your friend will either be dead from blood loss or the leg will be so infected we'll have to amputate. Your choice." The gray-bearded man's jaw tightened. "She's got a mouth on her. I'll give her that." "Frank," Jimmy gasped from the bunk. Let her work. Hurts too damn much." Frank hesitated, then nodded. "All right, you heard her. Rodriguez, Chen, get over here. We're holding him down." The next 20 minutes were brutal. Clara had set broken bones before, but never under these conditions. No anesthesia except whiskey. No sterile operating room. Just a dirty bunkhouse filled with terrified cowboys and one man screaming as she manipulated shattered bone back into place. She worked fast, her hands steady despite the blood and the noise. Reset the bone. Cleaned the wound with carbolic acid that made Jimmy pass out from the pain, which was probably a mercy. Stitched the torn skin. Splinted the leg with boards someone found in the barn. When she finally sat back, her dress was covered in blood and her hands were shaking, but the leg was set. The bleeding had stopped. Jimmy was unconscious but breathing steady. The bunkhouse had gone completely silent. Clara stood up, wiping her hands on a rag. "He needs to stay off that leg for at least 6 weeks, complete bed rest for the first 2 weeks. I'll need to check the wound daily for infection. If it starts to smell or if he develops a fever, you come get me immediately. Understood?" Frank nodded slowly. "Understood." "Good." Clara picked up her medical bag. "Someone clean this blood up, and next time one of you breaks something, don't wait an hour before getting me. The longer you wait, the worse it gets." She walked out of the bunkhouse with her head high, even though her legs felt like water. Made it halfway back to her cabin before she had to stop and lean against a fence post, her whole body trembling with delayed reaction. That's where Cole found her. "Heard you set Jimmy's leg," he said, appearing out of the darkness like a ghost. Clara jumped. "Jesus, do you ever make noise when you walk?" "Not if I can help it." He studied her blood-stained dress. "How bad was it?" "Compound fracture. Tibia and fibula both broken clean through. I got the bone reset and the wound cleaned, but infection is still a risk. I'll need to watch him closely." "Will he walk again?" "If I did my job right, yes. If infection sets in..." Clara shrugged. "We'll see." Cole was quiet for a moment. "The men are talking about you." "I'm sure they are. They're saying you didn't flinch, that you worked on Jimmy like you'd done it 100 times before." "I have done it 100 times before," Clara said tiredly. "Different setting, same bones. They're also saying you've got more balls than half the crew." Something that might have been amusement flickered in Cole's eyes. "Frank told them if they give you any trouble, he'll personally knock their teeth in." Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tug at her mouth. "Frank? The one who questioned whether I knew what I was doing?" "Same one. Turns out saving his best friend's leg earned you some respect." Cole shifted his weight. "You did good work tonight, Clara." It was the first time he'd used her first name, Clara noticed. "Just doing the job you hired me for," she said. "Still, not many people could have done what you just did." He paused. "Get some rest, and next time maybe try not to get quite so much blood on yourself." He walked away before she could respond. Clara looked down at her ruined dress and laughed. It came out slightly hysterical, but she didn't care. She'd done it, passed the test, proven herself useful. Maybe Cole had been right. Maybe the frontier really did care more about what you could do than who you used to be. The sun was starting to rise as Clara finally made it back to her cabin. She stripped off the bloody dress, washed as best she could with cold water from the basin, and fell into bed. Sleep came fast, dreamless, and heavy. When she woke, it was past noon, and someone had left a plate of food outside her door. Over the next few weeks, Clara fell into a routine. She checked on Jimmy Tate twice a day, watching for signs of infection that never came. The leg was healing clean. She treated smaller injuries as they happened: rope burns, cuts from barbed wire, a cowboy who got kicked in the ribs by an ornery mare. Nothing as dramatic as Jimmy's break, but steady work that kept her busy. The men started coming to her with problems they'd been ignoring for months. Chen showed her an old knife wound on his shoulder that hadn't healed right. Rodriguez had a cough that wouldn't quit. A kid named Billy had been walking around with an infected tooth for 2 weeks before Clara noticed him favoring one side of his jaw. "Open your mouth," she'd ordered. "It's fine," Billy protested. "Open your mouth." The tooth was abscessed, swollen, and angry. Clara pulled it in the bunkhouse while 3 men held Billy down, and he cursed her in both English and Spanish. But the infection drained, and the fever that had been building broke within hours. After that, Billy followed her around like a puppy, carrying her medical bag and asking endless questions about medicine. "Why'd you become a nurse?" he asked one afternoon while she was reorganizing her supplies. Clara considered lying, giving him some noble story about wanting to help people. But Billy was 19 and earnest, and she was tired of pretending. "Money," she said bluntly. "Nursing paid better than factory work or teaching, and I was good at it." Billy looked disappointed. "That's it? Just money?" "Just money," Clara confirmed. Then, because his face was so crestfallen, she added, "But I stayed because I realized I could actually make a difference. Save lives, fix things that were broken." She met his eyes. "Sometimes the reason you start something isn't as important as the reason you keep doing it." Billy thought about that. "Is that why you came out here, to keep doing it?" "Something like that." "Well, I'm glad you did. Jimmy would have lost that leg if you hadn't been here. Maybe would have died." He hesitated. "We all know that, even the ones who won't say it out loud." Clara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "Thank you, Billy." The winter deepened. Snow piled up in drifts higher than a man's head. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the wash basins overnight. Clara learned to dress in layers, to wrap her hands before going outside, to recognize the signs of frostbite in the men who worked long hours in brutal conditions. She also learned the rhythms of ranch life. The early mornings when the cowboys rode out to check on cattle scattered across thousands of acres. The midday meals in the cookhouse where men ate in shifts, talking about horses and weather and which sections of fence needed repair. The evenings when they gathered around stoves to play cards and tell stories, their voices carrying through the cold night air. Cole was everywhere and nowhere. Sometimes she'd see him working alongside the men, mending fence or breaking ice on water troughs. Other times he'd disappear into his office in the main house for days, managing the business side of the ranch. He spoke to her occasionally, always brief and professional, asking about injuries or supply needs. Clara told herself she didn't miss their conversations from that first day. Told herself it was better this way, keeping things strictly business. She was lying, and she knew it. There was something about Cole Mercer that got under her skin. The way he moved, economical and purposeful. The rare moments when something almost like a smile would cross his face. The scars on his hands from years of hard work. The way the men respected him, not just because he owned the ranch, but because he'd earned it. But Clara had learned her lesson about powerful men, about trusting people who held all the cards. So she kept her distance, did her job, and tried not to think about the rancher with dark eyes who'd saved her life. Then the calving season started, and everything got harder. Cows giving birth in freezing temperatures needed constant monitoring. The men worked around the clock, bringing weak calves into the barns, helping difficult births, fighting to save both mothers and babies in conditions that killed without mercy. Clara found herself working alongside them, helping where she could. She'd never delivered a calf before, but birth was birth. She understood the mechanics, the dangers, the desperate fight to bring new life into a world that seemed determined to snuff it out. One night, she was in the calving barn helping Frank with a breech birth when Cole appeared in the doorway. "How bad?" he asked Frank. "Bad. Calf's turned wrong. Been trying for 2 hours." Frank wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cold. "Might lose them both." Clara looked up from where she was kneeling beside the struggling cow. "Let me try." Both men stared at her. "You've done this before?" Cole asked. "On women. Same principle, different species." Clara was already rolling up her sleeves. "Frank, hold her steady. I need to turn the calf." What followed was messy, exhausting, and terrifying. The cow bellowed in distress. Clara's arm disappeared inside up to her shoulder, feeling for the calf's position. Everything was warm and slippery and wrong. "There," she muttered. "I've got a leg. Now, the other one." "Careful," Frank warned. "You twist too hard, you'll kill it." "I know." She worked by feel, slowly coaxing the calf into the right position. Her shoulders screamed in protest. Sweat dripped into her eyes. But finally, she felt the shift. "It's turned. Pull when I say." She withdrew her arm. "Now." Frank pulled. The calf slid out in a rush of fluid, landing in the straw. For a horrible moment, it didn't move. Then it coughed, shook its head, and tried to stand on wobbly legs. The cow lowed, exhausted but alive. Frank let out a whoop of triumph, and Clara sat back in the straw, covered in birth fluids and completely spent. Cole crouched beside her. "You all right?" "Just tired." She looked at the calf, now nuzzling against its mother. "They'll both make it?" "Thanks to you, yeah." Cole held out his hand. Clara took it, letting him pull her to her feet. His grip was warm, calloused, steady. He didn't let go immediately. "You keep surprising me, Nurse Whitmore. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "Haven't decided yet." But there was something in his eyes that made Clara's breath catch. Then he released her hand and stepped back. "Get cleaned up. You've earned some rest." Clara walked back to her cabin in a daze, only half aware of the cold. Her mind kept replaying that moment. Cole's hand in hers, the way he'd looked at her, the warmth that had nothing to do with the heated barn. She was in trouble, real trouble, because despite every warning bell in her head, despite everything she'd learned about protecting herself, Clara was starting to care about Cole Mercer. And that was the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. March arrived with a false spring that melted the worst of the snow, revealing muddy ground and the first tentative hints of green. The ranch came alive with activity. Fences needed repair. Equipment needed maintenance. The herd needed moving to fresh grazing land. Clara's medical duties slowed slightly, giving her time to think, to worry, to notice things she'd been too busy to see before, like the way Cole sometimes stood on the porch of the main house at sunset, staring out at the mountains with an expression that looked like loneliness, or how he never ate meals in the cookhouse with the men, always taking his food back to his office alone, or the fact that in 3 months at Iron Ridge, she'd never seen him laugh. Not once. "He used to be different," Frank told her one evening. They were sitting on the bunkhouse steps, watching the sun go down. "Before Sarah died, he'd joke around, play cards with the men. Hell, I even saw him dance once at a harvest celebration." "What happened to her?" Clara asked. He said childbirth complications, but Frank's expression darkened. Doctor in Cheyenne told him she was being hysterical, that women always complained during pregnancy. Cole believed him at first, thought Sarah was just scared. He shook his head. By the time he realized something was really wrong, it was too late. She bled out before they could get help. "And the baby?" "Stillborn, a girl." Frank's voice went rough. Cole blamed himself. Thought if he'd acted faster, trusted his instincts instead of the doctor, he could have saved them both, changed him, made him hard. Clara felt something crack inside her chest. That's not fair. He couldn't have known. Fair doesn't matter. Guilt doesn't care about fair. Frank looked at her. He hasn't looked at a woman since, hasn't let anyone close, built walls higher than the mountains. Why are you telling me this? Because I see the way he watches you when he thinks nobody's looking, and I see the way you watch him back. Frank stood up, his joints creaking. Just thought you should know what you're dealing with. Cole Mercer isn't an easy man. Might never be an easy man again, but he's a good one. Remember that. He walked away, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts and the dying light. She should forget it. Forget the way Cole's hand had felt in hers. Forget the rare smiles, the moments of connection. She was here to do a job, nothing more. Getting emotionally involved with her employer, with any man, was stupid and dangerous. But Her heart didn't care about stupid or dangerous. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning in late March. Clara was in her cabin inventorying medical supplies when Billy burst through the door without knocking. "There's been an accident," he gasped. "Stampede. They're bringing someone in now." Clara grabbed her bag and ran. Outside, she could hear shouting from the direction of the south pasture. A group of riders appeared over the ridge, moving fast. As they got closer, Clara could see they were carrying someone. Her stomach dropped. "Who is it?" "Don't know yet," Billy said, running beside her. They reached the bunkhouse just as the riders arrived. 4 men carefully lifted a body from one of the horses. The injured person was covered in blood and dust, barely conscious. Then Clara saw his face, and her heart stopped. It was Cole. "What happened?" she demanded, her training kicking in even as panic screamed through her veins. "Cattle spooked," Rodriguez said, his face pale. "Started running. Cole rode in to turn them, but his horse stumbled. He went down right in front of the herd. They trampled him before we could get him out." Clara's hands were already checking for injuries. Broken ribs, definitely. Possible internal bleeding. A deep gash across his forehead. One arm bent at a wrong angle. "Get him inside, now, and someone boil water. Lots of it." She looked at Billy. "I need you to ride to Cheyenne. Get Dr. Phillips. Don't stop for anything." "But that's a 3-hour ride. Then you'd better hurry." Clara's voice cracked like a whip. "Go!" Billy ran. The other men carried Cole into the bunkhouse and laid him on a cleared bunk. Clara cut away his shirt, revealing a torso already turning purple with bruises. When she pressed gently on his ribs, Cole groaned. "Can you hear me?" she asked, leaning close to his face. Cole's eyes fluttered open. "Clara, don't talk. Save your strength." She continued her examination. At least 2 ribs broken, maybe more. The arm was fractured but not compound. The head wound looked worse than it was. Scalp injuries always bled heavily, but the internal bleeding worried her. "Frank," she said quietly, "I need you to be honest. How hard did those cattle hit him?" Frank's jaw tightened. "Hard. They ran right over him. I thought he was dead when we pulled him out." Clara nodded, her throat tight. "Get everyone out except Rodriguez and Chen. I need to examine him properly." The men cleared out. Clara worked quickly, checking Cole's abdomen for signs of internal damage. His belly was rigid, tender. Not good. He might be bleeding inside, might have damaged organs. And there was nothing she could do about that except wait and watch. She cleaned the head wound, stitched it closed, splinted the broken arm, wrapped his ribs tight. Through it all, Cole drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling words she couldn't make out. Hours passed. Dr. Phillips finally arrived just before sunset, his horse lathered from the hard ride. He examined Cole thoroughly while Clara watched, her hands clenched into fists. "You did good work," Phillips said finally. "The ribs are set properly. The arm will heal. Head wound is clean." He paused. "But the internal bleeding—" "I know," Clara said. "There's nothing I can do about that. Nothing any of us can do except wait. If he makes it through the night without the bleeding getting worse, he'll probably survive." Phillips closed his bag. "But it's going to be close." After Phillips left, Clara pulled a chair up beside Cole's bunk and sat down. The bunkhouse was quiet, the other men giving them space. Someone had brought her coffee and food, but she couldn't eat. She just sat and watched Cole breathe, willing him to keep fighting. "You can't die," she whispered. "You hear me? You don't get to save my life just to throw away your own." Cole's eyes opened slightly. "Clara, I'm here." She took his hand without thinking. "I'm right here. Told you. Ranch life was dangerous." His voice was barely audible. "Shut up and rest." "Bossy." Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Then his eyes closed again. Clara held his hand and waited. Night fell. The bunkhouse grew cold. Someone brought her a blanket, but she barely noticed. All her focus was on Cole, on the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his hand in hers, the faint pulse at his wrist. Somewhere around midnight, his breathing changed, became more labored. Clara's heart seized. "Cole? Cole, stay with me." His eyes opened again, more alert this time. "Hurts." "I know. I'm sorry." She wished she had morphine, something to ease his pain, But her supplies were limited and she needed to save them for emergencies. This was an emergency. "In my bag," she told Rodriguez, who was watching from across the room. "Brown bottle. Bring it here." She gave Cole a careful dose of laudanum, just enough to take the edge off without risking his breathing. He relaxed slightly, his grip on her hand loosening. "Don't let go," he mumbled. "I won't." Clara tightened her fingers around his. "I promise." The night stretched on forever. Clara dozed in her chair, jerking awake every time Cole's breathing changed. She checked his pulse obsessively, watched for signs that the internal bleeding was getting worse. But slowly, imperceptibly, he started to improve. His color got better, his breathing easier. By the time dawn broke, painting the eastern sky pink and gold, Cole was sleeping naturally instead of unconsciously. Frank appeared in the doorway. "How is he?" "Better." Clara's voice was hoarse from disuse. "I think he's going to make it." Frank's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thanks to you." Clara shook her head. "Thanks to luck. If that internal bleeding had been worse..." She didn't finish the sentence. But it wasn't. Frank came closer, looking down at Cole. "He's tough. Takes more than a stampede to kill Cole Mercer." "Apparently so." Frank looked at their joined hands, then at Clara's face. "You should get some rest. I'll sit with him." "I'm fine." "Clara." Frank's voice was gentle. "You've been up all night. You're dead on your feet. Go sleep for a few hours. I'll come get you if anything changes." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to stay right here, holding Cole's hand, making sure he kept breathing, but exhaustion was catching up to her. She could barely keep her eyes open. "A few hours," she conceded. "Then I'm coming back." She stood up, reluctantly releasing Cole's hand, started toward the door. "Clara?" Cole's voice stronger now. She turned back. His eyes were open, clearer than they'd been all night. "Thank you," he said. Clara felt tears threaten and forced them back. "Just doing my job." "Like hell you were." Cole held her gaze. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first. I figured we're even." Something passed between them then. Understanding. Connection. The acknowledgement of something neither of them was ready to name. Then Clara fled, walking quickly back to her cabin before her emotions could betray her any further. Inside, she collapsed on her bed fully clothed and fell into sleep so deep it felt like drowning. She woke to knocking on her door. Disoriented, Clara stumbled up and opened it. Billy stood there with a plate of food. "Frank said you should eat, and Cole's asking for you." Clara's heart jumped. "He's awake?" "Been awake for an hour. Won't stop pestering everyone about where you are." She took the plate, forced down a few bites while she changed into clean clothes, then headed back to the bunkhouse. Cole was sitting up slightly, propped on pillows, looking pale but alive. When he saw her, relief crossed his face. "Thought you'd run off," he said. "Not likely." Clara sat in the chair beside his bunk and started checking his injuries. The head wound looked good, no signs of infection. "How's the pain?" "Feels like I got trampled by a herd of cattle." "That's because you did." She unwrapped the bandages around his ribs, checking for swelling. "You're lucky you didn't die." "So I've been told. Multiple times, by everyone." "Then maybe you should listen." Clara rewrapped the ribs, trying to ignore how aware she was of his skin under her hands. "You need to rest. No work for at least 6 weeks. Longer if those ribs don't heal properly." Cole's expression darkened. 6 weeks? This ranch doesn't run itself. Then I guess Frank and the others will have to run it. Because if you get back on a horse before you're healed, those ribs could puncture a lung and kill you. Is that clear enough? They stared at each other. Cole's jaw was set in a stubborn line Clara was beginning to recognize. She glared right back, refusing to back down. Finally, Cole looked away. "Fine. 6 weeks. Good." Clara stood up. "I'll check on you again this evening." "Clara, wait." She paused. "Last night," Cole said slowly, "you stayed with me. All night. You were badly injured. Someone needed to monitor you." Frank could have done that. Or Rodriguez? Clara's throat tightened. "They're not nurses. Neither are they terrified of losing people." Cole's eyes locked on hers. "I heard you, when you thought I was unconscious. You told me I couldn't die." She had. Clara remembered now, the desperate words she'd whispered in the dark. "You were delirious," she said. "You don't know what you heard." "I know exactly what I heard." Cole shifted, wincing. "And I know what it meant." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Clara knew she should leave, should maintain the professional distance that kept her safe. Instead, she sat back down. "What did it mean?" she asked quietly. Cole was silent for a long moment. "That maybe I'm not the only one feeling things I shouldn't feel." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Cole, I know," he interrupted. "I'm your employer. You work for me. Getting involved would be complicated and probably stupid." His expression was raw, unguarded in a way she'd never seen. "But I can't stop thinking about you. Haven't been able to since that first night in Cheyenne. And last night, when I thought I might die, the only thing I regretted was not telling you that." Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything she'd been trying to ignore, trying to suppress, came flooding back. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't trust powerful men, not after what happened in Philadelphia, not after—" "I'm not him," Cole said fiercely. "I would never hurt you, never use my position to—" "You don't understand." Clara stood up abruptly. "It's not about what you do. It's about what happens when things go wrong, when the powerful man decides he's done with you. I lose everything again, my job, my home, my future. I can't survive that twice." She walked out before Cole could respond, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. Behind her, she heard him call her name. But she didn't stop, because the truth was, Clara was falling for Cole Mercer, had been falling since that night in the blizzard, and that terrified her more than anything else on the brutal frontier ever could. Clara spent the next 3 days avoiding Cole Mercer as much as humanly possible while still doing her job. She checked his injuries twice daily, kept her examinations clinical and brief, and refused to meet his eyes. If he tried to talk about anything personal, she cut him off with questions about pain levels or mobility. It was cowardly, and she knew it. But the alternative, actually dealing with what he'd said, with what she felt, seemed infinitely worse. Frank noticed, of course. He cornered her outside the calving barn on the 4th day, his expression somewhere between amused and exasperated. "You planning to keep running forever?" he asked. "I'm not running. I'm working." "You're hiding." Frank crossed his arms. "And you're making Cole miserable in the process. He's been sulking in that bunkhouse like a wounded bear. He's recovering from serious injuries. He should be resting, not worrying about—" Clara stopped herself. "About you?" Frank finished. "Too late for that. The man's been worrying about you since the day he brought you here." He studied her face. "What are you so afraid of?" Clara looked away. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." So she told him. About Dr. Holbrook, about the assault, about how quickly her entire world had collapsed when she dared to say no to a powerful man. About the fear that lived in her bones now, the certainty that trusting someone with power over her would only end in destruction. Frank listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That doctor," he said finally. "He sounds like a real piece of shit." Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. That's one way to put it. But here's the thing, Clara. Cole Mercer isn't some city doctor who thinks he owns people. He's a rancher who barely survived losing the woman he loved because another man didn't take her seriously. Frank's voice softened. "You think he'd ever do to you what was done to him? What was done to you? People change. Power changes them. Some people, maybe. But I've known Cole 15 years. Watched him build this ranch from nothing. Seen him broke, seen him rich, seen him destroyed by grief. And through all of it, he's never been anything but fair. Hard, yes. Demanding, absolutely. But fair." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to hold on to her fear because fear was safer than hope. But she was tired. So damn tired of being afraid. "What if I'm wrong about him?" she whispered. "What if I let myself care and he turns out to be—" Then you'll survive it," Frank said bluntly. "Just like you survived Philadelphia. Just like you survived that blizzard. You're tougher than you think, Clara Whitmore. Stop acting like you're made of glass." He walked away, leaving Clara standing alone with her thoughts and the spring wind that smelled like new grass and possibility. That night she went to the bunkhouse. Cole was sitting up, reading by lamplight, his broken arm in a sling. When he saw her, he carefully set the book aside. "Come to tell me I'm healing wrong?" he asked. Clara closed the door behind her.
No, I came to apologize. Cole's eyebrows rose. For what? For running away. For avoiding you. For... She took a breath. For being a coward. You're not a coward.
I am, when it comes to this. Clara sat in the chair beside his bunk, the same one she'd spent that long night in. What you said the other day, about having feelings, about wanting... She forced herself to meet his eyes. I feel it too. Have been feeling it for weeks, and that terrifies me. Cole was very still. Because of what happened in Philadelphia. Because powerful men have all the cards. Because if this goes wrong, I lose everything, again. And if it goes right? The question hung between them. Clara had been so focused on the ways things could fall apart, she hadn't let herself imagine any other outcome. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what right even looks like anymore. Cole shifted, wincing slightly. Come here. Clara hesitated, then moved closer. Cole reached out with his good hand, his fingers finding hers. His palm was warm, calloused from years of work. I can't promise this won't get complicated, he said. Can't promise I won't make mistakes or that ranch life won't be hard. But I can promise you this. I will never use my position against you, never threaten your job or your home. And if you decide tomorrow or next week or next year that you want to leave, I'll respect that. You'll always have a choice, Clara. Always. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached with the wanting. How do I know you mean that? Because I'm putting it in writing. Cole nodded toward the table where his coat hung. Top inside pocket, there's an envelope. Clara retrieved it. Inside was a legal document dated 3 days ago. She scanned the contents, her breath catching. It was an amendment to her employment contract, guaranteeing her position for 5 years regardless of any personal relationship between them, stating explicitly that her employment could only be terminated for medical incompetence, not personal reasons, including a severance clause that would pay her a full year's salary if she chose to leave. You wrote this before we even talked, Clara said slowly. I wrote it the day after the accident, when I realized I couldn't keep pretending I didn't want more than a professional relationship. Cole's dark eyes were steady on hers. Figured if I was going to ask you to take a risk, the least I could do was make sure you had protection if things went south. Clara read the document again, looking for loopholes, for ways he could manipulate the language. But it was airtight, more generous than any contract she'd ever seen. Why? She whispered. Because you deserve to feel safe. Because I'm asking you to trust me, and I know how much that costs you. Cole squeezed her hand gently. And because I meant what I said. I'm not that bastard in Philadelphia. I won't ever be that bastard. Something broke open inside Clara's chest. Not the sharp crack of something shattering, but the slow thaw of ice that had been frozen for too long. I don't know how to do this, she said. Don't know how to be with someone without waiting for it all to fall apart. Then we'll figure it out together. Cole pulled her closer until she was perched on the edge of his bunk. One day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just us. Clara looked at their joined hands, his rough and scarred from ranch work, hers stained with medicines and marked with small burns from carbolic acid, both of them damaged in different ways, both trying to survive in a world that hadn't been kind. One day at a time, she repeated. Then, because she was tired of being afraid, and because Cole Mercer had just given her more safety than any man ever had, Clara leaned in and kissed him. It was tentative at first, careful, her lips brushing against his with the hesitation of someone who'd learned to expect pain instead of pleasure. But Cole's hand came up to cup her face, gentle and sure, and Clara felt herself relax into it. The kiss deepened, became something warmer, more real. When they finally pulled apart, Cole was smiling. Actually smiling, lines crinkling around his eyes in a way that made him look younger. Been wanting to do that since Cheyenne, he said. Clara laughed, the sound surprising her. You were unconscious in Cheyenne. Not the whole time. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're beautiful, you know that? I'm a disaster. I've got medicine stains on my dress and I smell like carbolic acid. Like I said, beautiful. Clara kissed him again just because she could. Just because for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something other than fear or exhaustion or the grim determination to survive. She felt happy. They kept it quiet at first. Not because they were ashamed, but because the ranch already buzzed with gossip, and neither of them felt like feeding the fire. Clara continued sleeping in her own cabin. Cole stayed in the bunkhouse while he recovered, then moved back to the main house. But they found time together in small, stolen moments. Early mornings when Clara would check his injuries and he'd pull her down for a kiss before she could protest. Late evenings when they'd sit on the porch of the main house, talking about everything and nothing while the sun set over the mountains. Quiet afternoons in his office where she'd help with paperwork and he'd tell her stories about building the ranch, about the early years when he'd been broke and desperate and willing to risk everything for a dream. The men figured it out anyway, of course. Cowboys were observant when they wanted to be. But instead of the hostility Clara had feared, she mostly encountered grins and badly concealed approval. "About damn time," Jimmy Tate said one morning, his leg finally healed enough to walk without a limp. "Boss has been alone too long, needs someone to keep him human." Billy was more direct. "You gonna marry him?" Clara choked on her coffee. "What? No, we've only been—" "It's not like that." "Why not? You love him, don't you?" Did she? Clara turned the question over in her mind. Love felt like too big a word, too dangerous. But when she thought about Cole, about his rare smiles and steady hands, about the way he listened when she talked and never made her feel small, something warm and terrifying unfurled in her chest. "It's complicated," she said finally. Billy snorted. "Adults always say that when the answer is yes, but they're too scared to admit it." He walked away before Clara could respond, leaving her standing there with the uncomfortable realization that a 19-year-old cowboy had just seen right through her. Cole's ribs healed slowly. The arm took longer. Clara monitored his progress obsessively, checking for signs of infection or improper healing. She made him do exercises to maintain mobility, ignoring his complaints about feeling like an invalid. "You are an invalid," she told him one afternoon while he struggled through range of motion work. "At least for another month. Stop trying to rush it. I've got a ranch to run. And Frank's doing fine running it. Better than fine, actually. He fixed that drainage problem in the north pasture you've been putting off for 2 years. Cole glared at her. "Whose side are you on? The side that wants you alive and functional." Clara guided his arm through another rotation, watching his face for signs of pain. "You're not invincible, Cole. That stampede proved it." "I know." His voice went quiet. "Scared the hell out of me, if you want the truth." Clara paused. "What did?" "The dying part." Cole met her eyes. "Not because I was afraid of death, but because I realized I finally had something worth staying alive for. And I might lose it before I even got a chance to see where it could go." Her throat tightened. "Cole, I love you," he said simply, in case that wasn't clear. Clara's hand stilled on his arm. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and wonderful. "You don't have to say it back," Cole continued. "I know it's fast. I know you need time. But I wanted you to know. Wanted to be honest about what this is for me." Clara thought about all the reasons she should be careful, should hold back, should protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. Then she thought about the legal contract sitting in her cabin, about the way Cole had given her safety before asking for anything in return, about the fact that he just handed her his heart without demanding she do the same. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't want to. Tried not to. But I do." The smile that crossed Cole's face was worth every risk she'd ever taken. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, his good arm pulling her close. Clara melted into it, into him, finally letting herself feel the full weight of everything she'd been holding back. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Clara jerked back. "What? I know it's fast. I know you probably think I'm crazy. But I'm 43 years old and I've been half dead inside for 7 years. You brought me back to life, Clara. Made me remember what it feels like to want something beyond just surviving another day." His hand cupped her face. "I don't want to waste time. Don't want to wait and wonder and play it safe. I want you to be my wife." Clara's heart was racing so fast she could barely breathe. "Cole, we've only been together a few weeks. Known you for 3 months. Loved you for most of that time." He held her gaze. "And I'm not asking you to say yes right now. Take time. Think about it. But I wanted you to know where I stand. What I want." She should say no. Should tell him it was too soon, too risky, too much. But when Clara looked at Cole Mercer, at this complicated, damaged, fiercely honest man who'd saved her life and then given her reasons to actually live it, she couldn't make herself refuse. "Ask me again in a month," she said, "when your ribs are healed and you're not high on laudanum." "I'm not high on laudanum." "You took a dose an hour ago." "Fine. In a month." Cole kissed her again, gentle this time. "But the answer better be yes, Clara Whitmore, because I'm not letting you go." The month passed in a blur of healing and work and stolen moments. Cole's ribs mended, his arm regained most of its strength. The ranch exploded into full spring, green and alive and beautiful. Clara found herself falling into a life she'd never imagined. She treated injuries and delivered calves and sat on the porch, with Cole watching storms roll across the plains. She learned to ride properly, got thrown from her horse twice, and climbed back on because cowboys were watching, and she'd be damned if she'd quit in front of them. She helped the cook with sick men's meals and taught Billy basic first aid, and slowly, carefully, let herself believe that maybe this could actually work. The proposal came on a Tuesday evening in early May. Clara was walking back from the calving barn when she saw Cole standing by the corral, holding something in his hand. "Come here," he called. She walked over, curious. Cole took her hand and pressed something cool and metal into her palm. A ring. Simple silver, no fancy stones, just clean lines and solid craftsmanship. The kind of ring made to last through hard work and harder years. "It was my mother's," Cole said. "Only valuable thing my family ever owned. She gave it to me before she died, told me to find someone worth giving it to." His eyes met hers. "Took me 43 years, but I finally did." Clara stared at the ring, her vision blurring. "Cole, I love you. Want to build a life with you. Want to wake up next to you for whatever years we've got left." He took the ring back, held it ready. "So I'm asking again. Clara Whitmore, will you marry me?" She thought about all the reasons to be scared, about Dr. Holbrook and Philadelphia, and how badly things could go wrong when you trusted the wrong person. Then she thought about the last 3 months, about Cole's steady presence and honest words and the way he'd protected her without controlling her, about the fact that she'd never felt safer or more herself than she did here on this brutal, beautiful frontier with this complicated man who loved her. "Yes," Clara said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Cole's whoop of joy startled the horses. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then swept her up in a spin that made her laugh, despite his ribs probably protesting. When he set her down, he was grinning like a fool. "We're doing this," he said, wonder in his voice. "We're doing this," Clara agreed. Then he kissed her while the sun set fire to the western sky. And for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, Clara felt like she'd finally come home. The news spread through Iron Ridge like wildfire through dry grass. By morning, everyone knew. Frank showed up at Clara's cabin with a bottle of whiskey and a rare smile. Billy actually hugged her, lifting her off her feet until she swatted him and told him to put her down. The other cowboys offered congratulations ranging from sincere to ribald, most involving speculation about how long before there'd be little Mercers running around the ranch. "June wedding," Cole announced that evening in the cookhouse. "Small ceremony, just us and the ranch. Then we're throwing the biggest damn party Wyoming's ever seen." The men cheered. Clara felt her face heat, overwhelmed by the sudden attention and affection. These rough cowboys who doubted her 3 months ago were now treating her like family, like she belonged. It made her throat tight with emotion she didn't know how to express. Planning the wedding was chaotic. Cole wanted to invite half the territory. Clara wanted something simple and small. They compromised on inviting everyone who worked on the ranch, a few neighboring ranchers Cole did business with, and Dr. Phillips from Cheyenne. "No Philadelphia people," Clara said firmly when Cole suggested reaching out to her old colleagues. "You sure? Might be nice to rub their noses in how well you're doing." "I don't need their validation. I've got everything I want right here." Cole kissed her for that, slow and sweet, until she forgot what they'd been talking about. The dress was a problem. Clara didn't own anything suitable for a wedding. The general store in Cheyenne had one ready-made dress in her size, a serviceable blue cotton that looked like it had been sewn by someone with minimal skill and less interest. "You're not getting married in that," Frank said flatly when she showed it to him. "It's fine, it's just a dress." "It's your wedding dress. It should be special." In the end, 3 of the ranch wives took matters into their own hands.
They showed up at Clara's cabin with fabric and patterns and determined expressions. What followed was a week of measurements and fittings and adjustments while Clara stood still and tried not to fidget. "Stop moving," Mrs. Chen ordered, pins in her mouth. "This is taking forever."
Beautiful things take time. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped back to examine her work. "Besides, you should see Mr. Mercer. He's been nervous as a cat for days." Clara smiled despite herself. Cole had been nervous, checking details obsessively, asking her opinion on everything, generally acting like a man terrified something would go wrong. It was endearing, also slightly ridiculous. "He knows I'm not going anywhere, right?" Clara asked. The three women exchanged knowing looks. "Men get strange about weddings," Mrs. Chen said, "especially men who've been alone as long as Mr. Mercer. He's afraid something will happen to take you away." "Nothing's going to happen." "Let him worry anyway," Mrs. Rodriguez advised. "Keeps him from getting too confident." The dress they created was simple but beautiful. Cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, fitted at the waist and flowing to the floor. Nothing like the elaborate confections Clara had seen in Philadelphia society pages, but perfect for a frontier wedding. When she tried it on the night before the ceremony, Clara barely recognized herself. She looked happy, settled, like a woman who'd finally found where she was meant to be. "You're going to break that man's heart in a good way," Mrs. Chen said softly. Clara hoped so. She really did. The wedding day dawned clear and warm. Someone had strung lanterns across the area between the main house and the barn, creating a makeshift aisle. Benches had been borrowed from Cheyenne's church. Wildflowers filled mason jars scattered everywhere, their sweet scent mixing with the smell of cooking meat from the feast being prepared. Clara got ready in her cabin with the ranch wives fussing over her. They fixed her hair, pinned flowers into the braids, made sure every detail was perfect. Through the window, she could see men gathering in their best clothes, looking uncomfortable in clean shirts and slicked back hair. "You ready?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Clara took a breath. Yes, they walked her out. The moment she appeared, conversation stopped. 40 cowboys and their families turned to stare. And at the end of the flower-lined aisle stood Cole Mercer, wearing a black suit that made him look like a stranger until she saw his eyes. Those were the same. Dark and intense and fixed on her like she was the only person in the world. Frank walked her down the aisle since she had no father to do it. He squeezed her arm when they reached Cole. "You're getting a good one," he told Cole. "Don't screw it up." "Wouldn't dream of it," Cole said, never taking his eyes off Clara. The ceremony was short. A circuit preacher who traveled through Wyoming performed it, his words about love and commitment and building a life together. Clara barely heard him. She was too focused on Cole's hands holding hers, on the way he was looking at her like she was something precious. When the preacher said they could kiss, Cole pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly enough to make the cowboys whistle and cheer. "Mine," he murmured against her lips. "Yours," Clara agreed. The party that followed was chaos in the best possible way. Tables groaned under food, whiskey flowed freely. Someone produced a fiddle and people started dancing, cowboys spinning their wives under the lantern light while children ran wild between the benches. Cole pulled Clara into the dancing, holding her close despite his still healing ribs. She stepped on his feet twice, unfamiliar with frontier dances, but he just laughed and guided her through the steps. "Happy?" he asked. Clara looked around at the party, at the people who'd become her family, at the ranch that had become her home. Then she looked at her husband, who'd saved her life and given her reasons to actually live it. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," she said honestly. Cole spun her one more time, then dipped her dramatically, while everyone cheered. When he pulled her back up, his expression was soft. "Good, because I plan on making you this happy for the rest of our lives." The party lasted until dawn. Clara danced until her feet hurt, laughed until her sides ached, accepted congratulations from people who'd become friends. Somewhere around midnight, she found herself standing apart from the crowd with Frank, both of them watching Cole argue good-naturedly with Rodriguez about something ranch-related. "Thank you," she said quietly. Frank looked at her. "For what?" "For pushing me. That day after Cole's accident. For telling me I was tougher than I thought." "You're tougher than you thought. Proved it every day since you got here." Frank's expression was warm. But you're welcome anyway. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the party continue around them. You think it'll last? Clara asked. This happiness? Nothing lasts forever. You know that. Frank's voice was gentle. But I think you two have as good a shot as anyone. You've both been through hell and came out the other side. That builds a foundation most people never get. Clara hoped he was right. Hoped that the happiness spreading through her chest like warm honey would endure through whatever came next. Cole appeared at her side, sliding an arm around her waist. Ready to go home, Mrs. Mercer? Mrs. Mercer, Clara's new name, her new identity. The woman who'd survived Philadelphia and freezing train platforms and the brutal Wyoming frontier to become someone she actually liked. Ready, she said. They walked back to the main house through the party, Clara's hand in Cole's, while lantern light danced across the Wyoming night. Behind them, the celebration continued. Ahead, their future waited. And for the first time since that terrible day in the Philadelphia hospital when Dr. Holbrook had put his hands on her, Clara wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. Ready for whatever challenges the frontier threw at them. Ready to build a life with a man who saw her as an equal partner instead of a possession. Ready, finally, to be happy. Cole opened the door to the main house and swept her up in his arms, carrying her across the threshold while she laughed and told him his ribs were still healing and he was being ridiculous. Let me be ridiculous, he said, kicking the door shut behind them. I just married the most incredible woman in Wyoming. I'm allowed. He set her down gently in the bedroom, the one Clara had moved her few belongings into earlier that day. The same room where Cole had slept alone for 7 years, haunted by the ghost of a wife he couldn't save. No ghost tonight. Just the two of them, building something new from the ashes of old pain. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. I love you, Clara Mercer. I love you too, she whispered back. Then he kissed her, and Clara let herself fall into it completely. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, happy endings were possible even for damaged people on the brutal frontier. Outside, the party continued until sunrise painted the eastern sky gold and pink. Inside, Cole and Clara built their own kind of celebration, one that had nothing to do with crowds and everything to do with two broken people finally finding someone who made them whole. And somewhere in the hours between darkness and dawn, Clara finally let go of Philadelphia, let go of Dr. Holbrook and the hospital and everything that had been destroyed there, because she'd found something better, something real and solid and hers. She'd found home. The first 6 months of marriage were easier than Clara had expected, and harder in ways she hadn't anticipated. The easy parts were obvious. Waking up next to Cole, building a life together, feeling safe for the first time in years. The hard parts were more subtle. Learning to share space with another person. Navigating the balance between being Clara Whitmore the nurse and Clara Mercer the rancher's wife. Figuring out how to be vulnerable without feeling weak. But they worked at it. Cole was patient when Clara's old fears surfaced, when she'd pull away without meaning to because some part of her brain still expected betrayal. Clara tried to remember that Cole's silence didn't mean anger, that his need for control over the ranch didn't extend to controlling her. They fought sometimes. Sharp, honest arguments about stupid things like whether to buy new medical supplies or repair the south fence first, about Clara working too hard, about Cole taking risks he shouldn't. But they always talked it through, always went to bed still married. It was messy and imperfect and real. Clara loved it. The ranch continued expanding. Cole bought adjacent land from a neighboring rancher who'd gone bankrupt. The herd grew. More men were hired. And Clara's medical duties expanded with it, treating everything from broken bones to pneumonia to the inevitable injuries that came from working with animals that weighed 1,000 pounds and had attitudes to match. She was treating a nasty rope burn on Rodriguez's hand one August afternoon when Billy came running into her medical cabin, his face pale. Clara, there's a man here from Cheyenne. Says he needs to talk to you. Urgent. Clara's stomach dropped. Nobody came from Cheyenne looking for her unless something was wrong. Where is he? Main house. Cole's with him. She finished bandaging Rodriguez's hand quickly and headed to the main house, dread building with each step. When she entered Cole's office, she found her husband standing with his arms crossed, face hard as granite, while a thin man in an expensive suit clutched a leather case. Mrs. Mercer, the man said when Clara entered. My name is Thomas Ashford. I'm an attorney from Cheyenne. I have some rather delicate information to convey. Clara's mouth went dry. What kind of information? Ashford glanced at Cole, then back to Clara. Perhaps we should speak privately. Anything you have to say to my wife, you can say in front of me, Cole said flatly. Ashford sighed. Very well, Mrs. Mercer, I've been retained by a Dr. Marcus Holbrook of Philadelphia. He's currently in Cheyenne and wishes to meet with you regarding certain allegations. The room tilted. Clara grabbed the edge of Cole's desk for support. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. Dr. Holbrook has filed a formal complaint with the Territorial Medical Board, claiming you've been practicing medicine illegally in Wyoming without proper licensing. He's also suggesting that your departure from Pennsylvania General Hospital was due to professional incompetence and moral turpitude. Ashford pulled papers from his case. He's demanding a hearing to determine whether you should be permitted to continue providing medical care in this territory. Clara couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. Holbrook was here, in Wyoming, coming for her again. That's bullshit, Cole said, his voice dangerously quiet. Complete bullshit, and you know it. I'm merely conveying Dr. Holbrook's position, Mr. Mercer. Whether it has merit is for the Territorial Board to decide. Ashford set the papers on the desk. The hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from today in Cheyenne. Mrs. Mercer's attendance is mandatory. And if she doesn't attend, Cole asked, then the board will rule in Dr. Holbrook's favor by default. She'll be barred from practicing any form of medicine in Wyoming territory. Ashford straightened. I should also mention that Dr. Holbrook has brought several colleagues from Philadelphia to testify regarding Mrs. Mercer's character and professional conduct. He was going to destroy her. Again. Just like in Philadelphia, except this time Clara had even more to lose. Her marriage, her home, the respect she'd earned, everything. Get out, Cole said. Ashford blinked. I beg your pardon? I said get out. You've delivered your message. Now leave my property before I have my men escort you off it. Ashford gathered his case hastily and fled. The moment the door closed, Clara's legs gave out. She would have hit the floor if Cole hadn't caught her, pulling her against his chest. He found me, she whispered. I don't know how, but he found me. Doesn't matter how. Cole's arms tightened around her. What matters is we fight this. Fight it? Cole, he's got lawyers and other doctors, and you've got me. You've got this entire ranch. You've got every person whose life you've saved in the last 8 months. Cole pulled back to look at her face. You think I'm going to let that bastard destroy you? Think any of us will? Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd seen how this played out before. Holbrook had power, connections, credibility. She had nothing except a ranch full of cowboys and a husband who loved her. It wouldn't be enough. It never was. He's going to win, she said, just like he won in Philadelphia, and then I'll lose everything here too. No, Cole's voice was steel. He won't. Not this time. He was wrong. Clara knew he was wrong, but she loved him for believing it anyway. That night, Cole called a meeting in the cookhouse. Every man who worked on Iron Ridge showed up, crowding into the space until there was barely room to breathe. Clara stood beside Cole, feeling their eyes on her, wondering if they'd already started doubting. Some of you may have heard we had a visitor today, Cole began. A lawyer from Cheyenne representing a doctor from Philadelphia who's trying to destroy my wife's reputation and run her out of Wyoming. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This doctor is claiming Clara isn't qualified to practice medicine, that she's incompetent and immoral and shouldn't be allowed to treat patients. Cole's jaw tightened. He's demanding a hearing in 2 weeks, bringing witnesses from back east to testify against her. That's horseshit, Frank said loudly. Clara's saved half our lives. Best medical care this ranch has ever had. Agreement rumbled through the room. Clara felt tears threaten and forced them back. I need to know where you all stand, Cole continued, because fighting this is going to take all of us. We need witnesses, people willing to travel to Cheyenne and testify about Clara's work here, people willing to stand up to fancy doctors and lawyers and tell the truth. Jimmy Tate stood up, leaning slightly on the cane he still used sometimes. I'll testify. Would have lost my leg if not for her. Maybe would have died. Me too, Billy said. She pulled my tooth when it was infected, saved me from blood poisoning. One by one, the men stood. Rodriguez, Chen. Every cowboy Clara had treated over the last 8 months. Even the ones she'd only helped with minor injuries stood in solidarity. "We're with you, Mrs. Mercer," Frank said. "All of us. That bastard wants a fight. He's got one." Clara's vision blurred. She'd expected maybe a few men would volunteer, but all of them? The entire ranch, ready to ride to Cheyenne and defend her? "Thank you," she managed. "All of you. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Frank replied. "Just be ready to fight, because we sure as hell are." The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Cole hired a lawyer from Cheyenne, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Pierce, who'd made a reputation defending unpopular causes. She interviewed Clara for hours, taking detailed notes about her training, her experience, every case she'd treated at Iron Ridge. "Holbrook's strategy will be to paint you as a fraud," Margaret said during one session. "A woman who lied about her credentials and fled Pennsylvania to escape consequences. We need to counter that with evidence of competence, documented cases, witnesses who can speak to specific treatments." Clara provided everything she could, detailed records of every injury she'd treated, notes from surgeries, letters from grateful families. It still didn't feel like enough. Meanwhile, Cole worked behind the scenes. He called in favors from other ranchers, from businessmen in Cheyenne, from anyone with influence. He sent telegrams to Pennsylvania, trying to find people who'd testify to Clara's character before Holbrook destroyed it. "We'll bury him in evidence," Cole said one night, holding Clara while she tried not to panic. "Show the board exactly what kind of man he is. He's respected, connected. Nobody back east will testify against him. Then we'll make them irrelevant. Focus on what you've done here, not what happened there." Clara wanted to believe it would work, but Holbrook had won before by being more powerful, more credible, more believed. What made this time different? The night before the hearing, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Cole breathed steadily beside her, his arm draped across her waist. "You awake?" he asked quietly. "Can't sleep." Cole pulled her closer. "Scared?" "Terrified." Clara's voice cracked. "What if we lose? What if the board sides with him? Then we fight the ruling, appeal. Take it all the way to the territorial governor if we have to. And if that doesn't work?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "Then we leave. Pack up and move to Montana or Colorado or California. Somewhere Holbrook's reach doesn't extend. Start over again." Clara turned to look at him in the darkness. "You'd do that? Leave Iron Ridge, everything you've built? I'd burn this whole ranch to the ground before I let that bastard take you from me." Cole's eyes were serious. "You're more important than land or cattle or any of this. You're my wife, and I protect what's mine." Clara kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. Fear and love and gratitude all tangled together. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But sleep wouldn't come. Clara lay awake until dawn, watching the sky lighten through the window, trying to prepare herself for whatever came next. They rode into Cheyenne with an entourage, 20 cowboys, all in their best clothes, looking uncomfortable but determined. Frank drove a wagon with Clara and Cole, while the others rode alongside. People stared as they passed through town, this small army heading toward the courthouse. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Clara walked into the courthouse on Cole's arm, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The main courtroom had been converted for the Territorial Medical Board's use. 3 board members sat at a raised table at the front, and at one of the side tables, surrounded by well-dressed men in expensive suits, sat Dr. Marcus Holbrook. He looked exactly as Clara remembered. 50s, graying hair, patrician features, the kind of face that inspired automatic trust. When he saw her, he smiled, that same smug smile from the supply room in Philadelphia. Clara's hands clenched into fists. Cole felt it and squeezed her arm gently. "Steady," he murmured. "Don't give him anything." They took their seats. Margaret Pierce sat on Clara's other side, already organizing papers. Behind them, the Iron Ridge Cowboys filled the benches, a wall of solid support. The head board member, a severe-looking man named Dr. Winters, called the hearing to order. "We're here to examine complaints filed by Dr. Marcus Holbrook of Pennsylvania General Hospital regarding the medical practice of Mrs. Clara Mercer, formerly Clara Whitmore." Dr. Winters adjusted his glasses. "Dr. Holbrook, you may present your case." Holbrook stood. "Thank you, Dr. Winters." "Gentlemen, I come before you today with a heavy heart. Clara Whitmore was once a nurse at my hospital, a promising one, I believed, but I was deceived. He launched into his story, the same lies he'd told in Philadelphia, refined and polished. Clara had made inappropriate advances. When rebuffed, she'd become vindictive, incompetent. Her work had deteriorated. Patients had suffered. The hospital had been forced to terminate her employment. She fled to Wyoming, Holbrook continued, and has apparently convinced people here that she's qualified to provide medical care. But I have documentation proving otherwise. Letters from hospital administrators, testimony from colleagues, evidence of her unfitness to practice medicine. He presented papers, called witnesses. Doctors who'd traveled from Philadelphia to repeat the lies. Each one testified to Clara's supposed incompetence, her instability, her unsuitability for medical work. Clara sat frozen, watching her character assassination happen in real time. Again. Then Holbrook played his final card. I have here, he said, holding up a document, Clara Whitmore's termination letter from Pennsylvania General Hospital, signed by the hospital board, explicitly stating that she was dismissed for professional misconduct and is barred from seeking employment at any affiliated institution. Dr. Winters examined the letter. This appears to be in order. It's a lie, Clara said, unable to stay silent. All eyes turned to her. Everything he said is a lie. He assaulted me. I refused him. He destroyed my career to cover it up. Mrs. Mercer, Dr. Winters said sharply, you'll have your turn to speak. Holbrook's expression was pitying. You see, gentlemen, the same instability that plagued her in Philadelphia, making wild accusations rather than accepting responsibility for her failures. Clara felt sick. It was happening exactly like before. Holbrook's word against hers, and his word carried the weight of credentials and connections she could never match. But then Margaret Pierce stood up. May I speak, Dr. Winters? Proceed. Margaret walked to the center of the room. Dr. Holbrook has presented an impressive case. Witnesses, documents, the weight of Philadelphia's medical establishment, all very compelling, but I'd like to ask a simple question. She turned to face Holbrook. If Clara Whitmore is truly as incompetent as you claim, how do you explain the fact that she successfully treated over 200 patients in the last 8 months without a single death or serious complication? Holbrook blinked. That's hardly relevant. It's absolutely relevant. Mrs. Mercer has detailed records of every patient she's treated at Iron Ridge Ranch. Broken bones set successfully, infections cured, emergency surgeries performed, lives saved. Margaret gestured to the cowboys behind Clara. And we have witnesses. Not doctors who've never met her, but patients whose lives she's saved. People who can testify to her skill, her knowledge, her competence. Objection, one of Holbrook's lawyers said. Cowboys aren't qualified to judge medical competence. They're qualified to know whether they lived or died, Margaret shot back. And every single one of them lived because of Clara Mercer's care. Dr. Winters frowned. You have documentation of these cases? Margaret placed a thick folder on the table. Complete medical records. Dates, injuries, treatments, outcomes. All successful. All demonstrating exactly the kind of skill and knowledge Dr. Holbrook claims Mrs. Mercer doesn't possess. The board members passed the folder between them, reading. Clara watched their faces, trying to gauge their reactions. Dr. Winters looked skeptical. The second board member, Dr. Hayes, seemed interested. The third, a younger man named Dr. Morrison, was frowning as he read. These are impressive, Dr. Morrison said slowly. This compound fracture case, that's advanced work, not something an incompetent nurse could manage. A fluke, Holbrook said quickly. Or perhaps she had help. Oh, from who? Margaret asked. The nearest doctor is 40 miles from Iron Ridge. Mrs. Mercer performed that surgery alone with only cowboys to assist, and the patient not only survived but made a full recovery. She pulled out another document. I also have a statement from Dr. Phillips of Cheyenne, who examined the patient afterward. He confirms the quality of the work. Holbrook's confident expression was starting to crack. This is absurd. You can't possibly judge her fitness based on frontier medicine. Why not? Frank's voice boomed from the back. Because we're just cowboys? Because what happens out here doesn't matter? Dr. Winters started. Frank Morrison, foreman at Iron Ridge Ranch, and I've got something to say. Frank stood up. Dr. Holbrook, you called Clara Whitmore incompetent. Said she couldn't be trusted to practice medicine. But I watched her save Jimmy Tate's leg when any other person would have given up. Watched her deliver calves in a blizzard. Watched her work on Cole Mercer after a stampede nearly killed him. And all of them lived. All of them healed. So you tell me, doctor, if she's so incompetent,
How'd she manage that, boss?
I second that, Jimmy Tate said, standing. She saved my leg. Probably saved my life. Best medical care I ever received, including from fancy city doctors. One by one, the cowboys stood. Billy, Rodriguez, Chen, each one offering testimony, speaking to specific cases, specific treatments. The board members listened, their expressions shifting from skeptical to thoughtful. Then Dr. Morrison asked the question that changed everything. Dr. Holbrook, he said slowly, you've presented termination paperwork and testimony from colleagues, but I notice none of your witnesses can speak to specific cases where Mrs. Whitmore's work was incompetent. You're making character judgments without concrete evidence of medical failure. Why is that? Holbrook's face flushed. Because her failures were more subtle. Poor technique, lack of knowledge. Then surely you can give us an example, a specific case where her treatment harmed a patient. Silence. Holbrook opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. There were many instances. Name one. More silence. Clara's heart was racing. She'd never thought to ask this question back in Philadelphia, too shocked and scared to demand concrete evidence. But now, watching Holbrook fumble for an answer he couldn't give, she saw the truth. He didn't have evidence. Had never had evidence, just lies and reputation and the automatic belief that came with being a powerful man. This is outrageous, Holbrook finally said. My word should be sufficient. Should it? Dr. Hayes spoke for the first time, his voice thoughtful. Dr. Holbrook, you're asking us to revoke Mrs. Mercer's ability to practice medicine based entirely on allegations from Philadelphia, allegations she disputes and for which you can provide no concrete evidence of actual medical incompetence. Meanwhile, we have documented proof of successful treatments here in Wyoming. Why should we value your word over that evidence? Because I'm a respected physician with 30 years of experience. Holbrook's composure was cracking. Because I know incompetence when I see it. Or, Margaret said quietly, because Mrs. Mercer rejected your advances and you decided to destroy her career in retaliation. The courtroom exploded. Holbrook's lawyers shouted objections. The board members called for order, and Clara sat frozen, unable to believe Margaret had actually said it out loud. That is a vile accusation, Holbrook shouted. I have never... Then explain this. Margaret held up a telegram. Statement from a nurse still employed at Pennsylvania General. She witnessed the incident in the supply room, saw you corner Mrs. Mercer, saw her push you away, and she's willing to testify to that fact if needed. Clara's breath caught. Someone had come forward? After all this time? This is a fabrication. Holbrook was turning purple. A desperate attempt to... Her name is Elizabeth Chen. She's worked at Pennsylvania General for 23 years. Impeccable reputation. No connection to Mrs. Mercer beyond being her colleague. Margaret's voice was ice cold. And she's not the only one. 2 other nurses have provided similar statements, all describing a pattern of behavior from you, Dr. Holbrook, a pattern of pressuring female staff and retaliating when they refused you. The room went absolutely silent. Dr. Winters looked at Holbrook with disgust. Is this true? No, they're lying. All of them lying because... Holbrook stopped, realizing how he sounded. Because why? Dr. Morrison asked. Because multiple nurses with nothing to gain decided to conspire against you? Or because you're a predator who's been protected by your reputation for too long? Holbrook looked around wildly, seeing the expressions on the board members' faces, on the cowboys' faces, on everyone in the courtroom. The belief that had always protected him was gone, stripped away by evidence and testimony and the simple fact that his story didn't make sense. I want these proceedings stopped, he said desperately. This is a witch hunt. I'm being persecuted. You're being held accountable, Dr. Hayes said flatly, possibly for the first time in your career. He looked at his fellow board members. I've heard enough. I move that we dismiss all charges against Mrs. Mercer and commend her for excellent medical work under challenging conditions. Seconded, Dr. Morrison said immediately. Dr. Winters was slower but finally nodded. Motion carries. Mrs. Mercer, this board finds no evidence of incompetence or misconduct. You're free to continue practicing medicine in Wyoming territory. Furthermore, we're granting you official recognition as a frontier medical practitioner, with all the authority that entails. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Cowboys whooped and hollered. Cole pulled Clara into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. And through it all, Clara watched Marcus Holbrook's face as his world collapsed. The board wasn't finished. Dr. Holbrook, Dr. Winters continued, this board has no jurisdiction over Pennsylvania medicine, but we'll be sending a full report of these proceedings to the Pennsylvania Medical Society, along with the witness statements Mrs. Pierce has provided. I strongly suggest you return east and prepare to answer some very difficult questions. Holbrook stared at them, his face ashen. Then, without a word, he turned and fled the courtroom. His lawyers scrambled to follow, leaving behind papers and briefcases in their haste. The moment he was gone, Clara started crying. Not sad tears, relief, joy, the release of months of fear. Cole held her while she sobbed into his shirt, murmuring reassurances she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. She'd won, actually won. Against a powerful man with every advantage, Clara had won. Margaret Pierce appeared beside them, smiling. That went better than expected. The witness statements, Clara managed through her tears. How did you... Took some digging and a lot of telegrams, but once I started asking questions in Philadelphia, people started talking. Turns out Holbrook's made a lot of enemies over the years. They just needed someone to give them permission to speak up. Margaret squeezed Clara's shoulder. You should be proud. You didn't just save yourself today. You probably saved every woman who would have been Holbrook's victim in the future. That made Clara cry harder. Cole thanked Margaret, shook her hand, promised to send payment. Then he guided Clara out of the courtroom, through the celebrating cowboys, into the bright Wyoming sunshine. It's over, he said quietly. He's gone. Can't hurt you anymore. Clara looked up at her husband, at the man who'd believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself, who'd rallied an entire ranch to defend her, who'd hired a lawyer and gathered evidence and refused to let her face this alone. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for fighting for me. Always, Cole said simply. For the rest of our lives, Clara, I'll always fight for you. She kissed him then, right there on the courthouse steps while cowboys whistled and townspeople stared. Kissed him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tried to destroy her and failed. When they finally broke apart, Frank was organizing the men for the ride back to Iron Ridge. We celebrating tonight? He called. Damn right we are, Cole called back. Biggest party the ranch has ever seen. The ride home was joyous, loud, filled with laughter and terrible singing. Clara rode beside Cole, her hand in his, watching the Wyoming landscape roll past. The same landscape that had seemed so harsh and unforgiving 8 months ago now felt like home. When Iron Ridge came into view, Clara felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the certainty that she belonged here. That this place, these people, this life, it was hers and nobody could take it away. The party that night exceeded even their wedding celebration. Every ranch family within 50 miles showed up. Music and dancing and food, and more whiskey than was probably wise. Clara danced until her feet hurt, accepted congratulations until her face hurt from smiling, and somewhere around midnight found herself sitting on the porch with Cole, watching the festivities continue below. You happy? He asked. Clara thought about everything that had brought her here. Philadelphia, the assault, the lies, the freezing train platform, the desperate gamble of accepting Cole's job offer, every terrible thing and hard choice that had led to this moment. Yes, she said, happier than I ever imagined possible. Cole pulled her close. Good. Because we're just getting started, you and me. Still got a whole life to build together. Clara leaned into him, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the Wyoming wind on her face. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Music drifted up from the party. And Clara Mercer, nurse, wife, survivor, finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind her. That maybe, from here on out, things could actually be good. She was wrong, of course. Life on the frontier was never that simple. But for tonight, in this moment, Clara let herself believe it anyway. And that was enough. Clara was wrong about the worst being behind her, but she was also wrong about what the future would bring. Life didn't get easier after the hearing. It got bigger. News of the trial spread across Wyoming territory like wildfire. Within weeks, ranchers from neighboring counties started showing up at Iron Ridge, asking if the nurse who'd beaten a Philadelphia doctor in court could look at their sick children, their injured hands, their wives struggling through difficult pregnancies. Clara found herself riding out to distant homesteads, treating patients in conditions that would have horrified her Philadelphia colleagues. She loved every minute of it. "You're going to work yourself to death," Cole said one evening in October, watching her pack her medical bag for another distant call. "Mrs. Henderson is 8 months pregnant and showing signs of preeclampsia. I'm not letting her die because the ride is long." "At least take Billy with you. Roads aren't safe after dark." Clara kissed him quickly. "Already arranged it. Stop worrying." But Cole did worry. Clara could see it in the way he watched her leave, the way he'd wait up no matter how late she returned. She understood why. He'd lost one wife to medical complications and a doctor's negligence. The fear of losing another lived in him like a permanent scar. The trip to the Henderson homestead took 3 hours. Clara arrived to find Mrs. Henderson's husband pacing frantically while his wife lay in bed, her face swollen, blood pressure dangerously high. "How long has she been like this?" Clara asked, already examining her patient. 2 days, maybe 3. She said it was normal pregnancy swelling, but I knew something was wrong. Clara worked through the night, managing Mrs. Henderson's symptoms, monitoring the baby's heartbeat, making the difficult call about when to induce labor versus wait. At dawn, she delivered a healthy baby girl while the sun rose over the Wyoming plains. Mother and child both survived. Mr. Henderson cried, actually broke down sobbing while holding his daughter, thanking Clara over and over until she had to physically extract herself from his gratitude to clean up. On the ride back to Iron Ridge, Billy was uncharacteristically quiet. "What?" Clara finally asked. "You saved them both. Mrs. Henderson and the baby." "That's the job." "No, I mean," Billy struggled for words. "You're changing things. Out here, women die in childbirth all the time. Babies die. People just accept it as the way things are. But you're making it different." Clara thought about Sarah Mercer, about Cole's wife and child who died because a doctor hadn't taken them seriously, about all the women across the frontier who suffered and died in silence because medical care was too far away, or too expensive, or too dismissive of their pain. "Someone has to," she said quietly. By December, Clara was seeing so many patients from outside Iron Ridge that Cole had a separate building constructed, a small clinic with examination rooms, a surgery space, and storage for medical supplies. It wasn't fancy, nothing like the hospitals back east, but it was clean and functional and hers. The grand opening was informal. Clara simply started seeing patients there instead of in her cabin. But word spread, and soon people were calling it the Iron Ridge Clinic, like it was an official institution instead of one nurse working out of a glorified barn. "You need help," Frank said one afternoon, watching Clara treat a line of patients that stretched out the door. "Can't do all this alone." "I'm managing." "You're exhausted. When's the last time you slept a full night?" Clara couldn't remember. Between the clinic, ranch medical duties, and emergency calls to distant homesteads, sleep had become something she grabbed in short bursts between crises. That night, she mentioned it to Cole. "Frank's right," he said. "You need an assistant, maybe 2. "Where would I find nurses out here? Most women with medical training stay east where it's civilized." "Then train your own." Cole looked at her seriously. "There are women on ranches all across Wyoming doing basic medical care for their families. What if you taught them to do it properly? Make them real nurses?" The idea took root in Clara's mind. A training program, teaching frontier women the skills to provide medical care in their own communities. It could work. It could actually work. She started small, put out word that she'd teach basic nursing skills to any woman interested. Expected maybe 5 or 6 to show up. 23 arrived for the first class. They ranged from 16 to 60, from ranchers' wives to store clerks to a saloon girl from Cheyenne who wanted a respectable profession. Clara taught them in the clinic, covering everything from wound care to recognizing symptoms of serious illness to basic midwifery. Some dropped out quickly, overwhelmed by the work or unable to handle blood, but 12 stuck with it, showing up every week despite long rides and harsh weather. Clara pushed them hard, the same way her instructors had pushed her back in Philadelphia. No coddling, no excuses. Just the brutal truth that mistakes in medicine cost lives. 6 months later, 5 of them graduated. Clara held a small ceremony, presenting each woman with a medical bag and a certificate declaring them trained frontier nurses. It wasn't official, no medical board recognized it, but Clara didn't care. These women knew their work, could save lives. That was what mattered. "You're building something," Cole said that night, watching Clara add the certificates to her records. "Not just treating patients, building an actual medical system for the territory. It's not enough, though. We need a real hospital, somewhere patients can stay for extended treatment, where we can do complex surgeries, then let's build one." Clara looked at him. "Cole, that would cost—" "I know what it would cost, and I've got the money." His expression was serious. "Iron Ridge is growing. The town's growing. We need a hospital anyway. Might as well build it right. We're talking about a massive project, years of construction, thousands of dollars." "So? We've got years, we've got money. What we don't have is medical care for people who need it." Cole took her hand. "Let's build it, Clara. Let's build something that lasts." Construction began in the spring of 1889. A 2-story building on the edge of what was rapidly becoming the town of Iron Ridge. Not just a ranch anymore, but an actual settlement with a general store, a school, and a growing population. Cole donated the land and a substantial portion of the construction costs. Other ranchers contributed. Even the cowboys from Iron Ridge volunteered labor during their off time. The hospital took 2 years to complete, 2 years of setbacks and budget overruns and arguments about design. But when it finally opened in the spring of 1891, Clara stood in the main hall and cried. It was small by Eastern standards, only 20 beds, 2 operating rooms, a dispensary. But it was clean and well-equipped, and hers. The Iron Ridge Frontier Hospital, with Clara Mercer listed as the chief medical director. "Your mother would be proud," Frank said quietly, standing beside her. Clara wiped her eyes. "I never told you about my mother." "Didn't have to. Takes a certain kind of strength to become what you've become. Had to come from somewhere." He was right. Clara's mother had been a laundress who'd worked herself to death to put Clara through nursing school, had believed education was the only way her daughter would escape poverty. She'd died before seeing Clara graduate, but Clara thought about her every time she treated a patient who couldn't pay, every time she taught another woman the skills that could save lives. The hospital changed everything. Suddenly, people from across Wyoming Territory had somewhere to go for medical care. Clara hired 2 of her trained nurses as permanent staff. Dr. Phillips from Cheyenne agreed to visit twice a month for consultations and to perform surgeries beyond Clara's training. Patients came, more than Clara had anticipated, more than the hospital could sometimes handle. She worked brutal hours, sleeping in her office when cases ran late, pushing herself past exhaustion because people needed help and she couldn't turn them away. Cole watched her burn herself out with increasing concern. "You're going to collapse," he said one night after she'd worked a 36-hour shift dealing with a typhoid outbreak. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground." His voice was sharp. "Clara, I didn't build you a hospital so you could work yourself to death in it. These people need you alive, functional, not burned out and useless because you tried to save everyone yourself." Cole grabbed her shoulders gently. "You've got staff now. Use them. Delegate. Stop acting like you're the only person who can do this work." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was making her dizzy, and Cole was right. She couldn't keep going like this. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted quietly. "Don't know how to not take every case personally." "I know. That's what makes you good at this. But it's also what's going to destroy you if you're not careful." Cole pulled her close. "Promise me you'll rest. Take a day off. Let someone else handle things," Clara promised. Kept the promise for exactly 3 days before an emergency surgery pulled her back. But she tried at least, started setting boundaries, letting her nurses handle routine cases, actually sleeping at night instead of staying at the hospital around the clock. It helped. Slowly, Clara found a rhythm that didn't require sacrificing her health. The hospital thrived under shared responsibility, the trained nurses proving more capable than Clara had dared hope. The years passed. Iron Ridge grew from a settlement into a proper town. The ranch expanded until Cole owned land stretching 50 miles in every direction. The hospital added a third floor, more beds, better equipment. Clara's training program graduated new classes of nurses every year, sending them out to communities across the territory. And through it all, Clara and Cole built their life together. Not the perfect romance from storybooks. They fought sometimes, disagreed about money and priorities and how to handle problems. Cole could be controlling when he was scared. Clara could be stubborn when she was tired. But they worked at it, talked through problems, chose each other every day even when it would have been easier not to. In 1893, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified her. She'd seen too many women die in childbirth, knew too well how quickly things could go wrong. And Cole's reaction when she told him confirmed her fears. "No," he said flatly. "Absolutely not." Clara blinked. "What?" "I can't. Clara, I can't lose you like I lost Sarah. I can't watch you." His voice broke. "There are ways to prevent this, to end it early. I know you know them." The suggestion hit like a slap. "You want me to abort our child? I want you alive." Cole was shaking. "You're more important than a baby we don't even have yet. More important than anything. Cole, I'm serious. I won't risk you. Not for this. Not for anything." They fought for 3 days. The worst fight of their marriage. Cole desperate to protect her from what had killed Sarah. Clara insisting she could handle it, that she understood the risks better than anyone. Both of them scared and stubborn and unable to find common ground. Finally, Dr. Phillips intervened. "You're both being idiots," he said bluntly, sitting them down in his Cheyenne office. "Cole, Clara isn't Sarah. She's a medical professional who knows her own body. She'll have the best care available. And Clara, your husband's fear isn't irrational. He's watched this kill someone he loved. That kind of trauma doesn't just disappear." "So what do we do?" Clara asked. "You talk. Really talk. About what you're both afraid of. About what you need from each other. And then you make a decision together instead of fighting separate battles." That night, Clara and Cole sat on their porch while the sun set over Wyoming. "I'm terrified," Cole admitted. "Every time I think about you pregnant, I see Sarah. See the blood. See her dying while I stood there helpless." "I'm scared too," Clara said quietly. "But I'm also a nurse who's delivered hundreds of babies. I know what to watch for, know when to ask for help. I'm not going into this blind." "What if that's not enough? What if something goes wrong anyway?" "Then we deal with it, together." Clara took his hand. "But I need you to trust me, Cole. Trust that I know my own body. Trust that I'll tell you if something's wrong. Can you do that?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I can. The fear, it's so big, Clara. Sometimes I can barely breathe past it." "Then we'll breathe through it together." She squeezed his hand. "One day at a time, just like we've always done." It wasn't perfect. Cole's anxiety didn't magically disappear. But he tried. Listened when Clara explained what was normal versus concerning. Forced himself to step back when his fear made him want to control everything. The pregnancy was difficult. Clara had complications, early bleeding that terrified them both, blood pressure issues in the 3rd trimester, exhaustion so profound she could barely function. But she managed it, monitored herself obsessively, and asked for help when she needed it. Their son was born in March of 1894 on a cold, clear morning. The delivery was hard. 20 hours of labor that left Clara shaking and spent. But when Dr. Phillips finally placed the baby in her arms, alive and healthy and screaming his lungs out, Clara looked at Cole and saw tears streaming down his face. "We did it," she whispered. Cole couldn't speak, just held them both, his hands trembling, making sounds that might have been prayers or might have been sobs. They named him Thomas after Clara's father. He was colicky and demanding and kept them awake for months. Clara had never been so exhausted in her life. But she also discovered that motherhood fit her in unexpected ways. The fierce protectiveness, the problem-solving, the way nothing else mattered when Thomas needed her. "You're good at this," Mrs. Chen said one afternoon, watching Clara nurse Thomas while simultaneously giving instructions to a nurse about a patient. "I'm a disaster. Look at this mess. You're doing 3 jobs at once and managing all of them. That's not disaster. That's impressive." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Your son is lucky to have you."
Thomas was 18 months old when Clara got pregnant again. This time, she didn't tell Cole immediately. Waited until she was sure, until she'd worked through her own fears about whether she could handle another pregnancy, another child. When she finally told him, Cole's face went white. Clara pas, iti lasha. I know you're scared, but I can do this. We can do this. The first pregnancy nearly killed you. It didn't, though. I'm still here, still healthy. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. We made it through once. We can do it again. Cole's jaw tightened. What if I can't watch you go through that again? What if the fear is too much? Then you lean on me when you need to, and I'll lean on you, like always.
Their daughter was born in December of 1895. The delivery was faster, easier. Cole still paced outside the birthing room like a caged animal, but when Dr. Phillips emerged with the news that both mother and child were fine, he actually smiled. They named her Sarah, after Cole's first wife. Clara suggested it, wanting to honor the woman whose death had shaped so much of their lives. Cole cried when she told him, holding their daughter and whispering promises to her in the dark. The years that followed were full and chaotic and exhausting. 2 children, a hospital, a ranch, a marriage, all demanding attention simultaneously. Clara learned to function on minimal sleep, to prioritize ruthlessly, to accept that she couldn't do everything perfectly. Thomas grew into a serious boy who asked endless questions about medicine and how bodies worked. Sarah was fearless, climbing everything in sight and giving Cole heart attacks on a regular basis. They were perfect and terrible, and everything Clara hadn't known she wanted. In 1898, Clara started feeling tired all the time. At first, she blamed it on the children, the hospital, the general exhaustion of frontier life. But when the fatigue persisted, she examined herself properly and discovered a lump in her breast. Cancer. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. She told Cole that night, watching his face crumble as she explained what she'd found. "No," he said. "Not this, not now. We're supposed to have more time." "Cole, how bad is it?" "I don't know yet. Need to examine it properly. Maybe get a second opinion from someone who specializes in this." Cole was already planning. "We'll go to San Francisco. I heard about a surgeon there who's doing new cancer treatments. We'll take the kids, make a trip of it." "Cole, stop." Clara took his hands. "We don't even know if it's operable yet. Don't borrow trouble before we have to." But the trouble was already there. Dr. Phillips examined her the next day, his expression grim. "It's advanced," he said quietly. "Surgery might help, but Clara, you know the statistics. Breast cancer this progressed." "I know." Clara's voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. "What are my options?" They discussed it. Surgery to remove the tumor. Possible radiation treatment if they could get to a facility that offered it. Pain management for when things got bad. The prognosis was poor. Maybe a year, maybe 2 if she was lucky. Clara was 41 years old. Her children were 4 and 6. She'd built a hospital, trained dozens of nurses, saved countless lives. And now she was dying. The unfairness of it threatened to overwhelm her. But Clara had never had the luxury of indulging in unfairness. She'd learned young that life didn't care about fair, only about survival. So she made plans. Underwent the surgery, which bought her time but not a cure. Arranged for the hospital's management to transition to Dr. Phillips and her most senior nurses. Wrote letters to Thomas and Sarah for them to read when they were older, trying to explain everything she wouldn't be there to tell them in person. And she spent time with her family. Every moment she could, knowing it was limited. Cole struggled. Watching the woman he loved slowly dying was destroying him in ways he couldn't hide. Sometimes Clara would wake in the night to find him sitting beside the bed, just watching her breathe like he was afraid she'd stop if he looked away. "I can't do this without you," he said one night. "You did it before. You'll do it again." That was different. I didn't know what I was losing then. His voice broke. "How am I supposed to raise our children alone, run this ranch, live in this house where everything reminds me of you?" Clara didn't have good answers, but she tried anyway. "You'll do it because they need you, because the ranch needs you, because giving up would mean my death destroyed you, and I refuse to let that happen." She pulled him close. "You're the strongest man I've ever known, Cole Mercer. You'll survive this, and you'll make sure our children know how much I loved them." The end came faster than expected. By August of 1899, Clara was bedridden, the cancer spreading despite the surgery. The hospital she'd built now housed her as a patient, her own nurses caring for her with heartbreaking gentleness. Frank visited often, bringing news from the ranch, telling her stories to distract from the pain. Billy, now a young man, sat with her and read aloud when she was too tired to talk. Dr. Phillips managed her symptoms as best he could, but they both knew there was nothing more to be done. Cole barely left her side. He'd moved into the hospital room, sleeping in a chair, holding her hand through the worst of it. Thomas and Sarah visited every day, too young to fully understand, but old enough to know their mother was leaving. On a hot afternoon in late August, Clara felt the end approaching. The pain had dulled, replaced by a strange floating feeling. She asked to see her family one more time. Cole lifted Thomas and Sarah onto the bed beside her. Clara looked at her children, Thomas's serious face, Sarah's fearful eyes, and tried to memorize every detail. "Be good for your father," she whispered. "Take care of each other. And remember I loved you more than anything." "Don't go, Mama," Sarah said, her voice small. "I don't want to, baby, but sometimes we don't get to choose." Clara looked at Cole. "Take them out, please. I want to talk to you alone." Cole carried the children out, returned a few minutes later. His face was ravaged, tears streaming openly now. "I'm sorry," Clara said. "Sorry I'm leaving you with all this." Don't apologize for dying." Cole's voice was rough. "You fought. That's all anyone can do. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Live. Don't just survive like you did after Sarah. Actually live. Find happiness again. Maybe even love again someday." Clara squeezed his hand weakly. "You saved me that night in the blizzard. Let someone save you from the grief that's coming." "I can't promise that." "Promise anyway, for me." Cole's face crumpled. "I'll try. That's all I can give you. That's enough." Clara's breathing was getting shallower. "One more thing. The hospital. Keep it going. Keep training nurses. Keep saving lives. That's my legacy, Cole. Make sure it survives." "I will. I swear it." "Good." Clara felt herself fading. "I love you. Loved you from that first night, I think. When you carried me through the snow like I was something precious instead of something broken." "You were never broken," Cole said fiercely. "You were the strongest person I ever met. Are the strongest person I ever met." Clara smiled. "Liar. But I love you for it." Those were the last words she spoke. She slipped into unconsciousness shortly after, Cole holding her hand, and died peacefully just before midnight. The funeral was massive. People came from across Wyoming territory, patients she'd treated, nurses she'd trained, families whose lives she'd saved. The line of mourners stretched for half a mile. They buried her on a hill overlooking Iron Ridge Ranch, the place she'd called home for 12 years. Cole stood at the grave long after everyone else had left, holding Thomas with one hand and Sarah with the other. Frank approached quietly. "She was something special," Frank said. "Yeah, she was." "You going to be all right?" Cole looked at his children, both crying, both looking to him for comfort he didn't know how to give. "I don't know. Ask me in a year." But he tried. That was the thing about Cole Mercer. He always tried. He threw himself into raising Thomas and Sarah, into running the ranch, into keeping the hospital running, just like Clara had made him promise. The hospital became his obsession. He expanded it, adding more beds, better equipment. Funded Clara's nursing program generously, making sure it survived and grew. Within 10 years, Iron Ridge Frontier Hospital was the best medical facility in Wyoming territory, with satellite clinics in neighboring counties and a nursing school that trained women from across the West. Thomas grew up to become a doctor, inspired by his mother's work. He studied in Chicago and Philadelphia, the same city that had tried to destroy Clara, and returned to Wyoming to practice frontier medicine. Sarah became a nurse herself, running the Iron Ridge Hospital's nursing program and training the next generation. Cole never remarried, lived another 32 years after Clara's death, building the ranch into one of the largest operations in the American West. But those who knew him said he was never quite whole after she died, that he carried her loss like a wound that wouldn't heal. He died in 1931 at the age of 88, quietly in his sleep. His last words were reportedly Clara's name. They buried him beside her on that hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone read exactly what Clara had wanted. forever bound beneath the western sky. The Iron Ridge Frontier Hospital continued operating until 1962, when it was finally replaced by a modern medical center. But the original building was preserved as a museum, honoring the woman who'd built Wyoming's first comprehensive medical system from nothing but determination and skill. The nursing program Clara started trained over 3,000 women between 1889 and 1950. Many of them went on to establish their own clinics and hospitals across the frontier. Her model of training local women to provide medical care in their communities became standard practice throughout the American West. In 1968, the Wyoming Medical Association posthumously recognized Clara Mercer as one of the founders of frontier medicine in the territory. They noted that her work had saved countless lives and fundamentally changed how medical care was delivered in rural areas. The recognition came 69 years too late for Clara to know about it, but perhaps that was fitting. She'd never done the work for recognition. She'd done it because people needed help, and she had the skills to provide it. Because staying silent about injustice felt like death. Because a powerful man had once tried to destroy her, and she'd refused to stay destroyed. Clara Whitmore Mercer's story became legend in Wyoming. The disgraced nurse who'd fled Philadelphia, nearly frozen to death on a train platform, been rescued by a lonely rancher, and gone on to build a medical empire. People told it to their children, their grandchildren, proof that the frontier rewarded courage more than pedigree. But the real story was simpler and more human than the legend. It was about a woman who'd survived assault and slander, who'd gambled everything on a desperate escape west, who'd found unexpected love with a damaged man in an unforgiving place, who'd built something meaningful from scraps and stubbornness, who'd faced her destroyer in court and won not because justice was certain, but because she'd refused to be silenced. It was about all the small choices that add up to a life. The decision to accept Cole's job offer, the choice to trust him despite her fears, the determination to keep working even when exhausted, the courage to build a hospital when everyone said it was impossible, the willingness to train other women instead of hoarding knowledge, the fierce insistence that frontier women deserve the same medical care as city women. It was about the truth that survival isn't the same as living. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is try for happiness even when experience has taught you to expect pain. That building something that outlasts you matters more than personal glory. And it was about love, messy, imperfect, human love between two people who'd both been broken and who chose to build something new from the pieces. The museum on the hill at Iron Ridge still stands. Inside, visitors can see Clara's original medical bag, worn from 12 years of hard use, her surgical instruments, the certificate she gave to her first graduating class of nurses, letters from grateful patients, and Cole's wedding ring, which he'd asked to have buried with Clara, but which his children had saved instead. There's a photograph too, one of the few that exist. Clara and Cole standing in front of the completed hospital in 1891, both unsmiling because cameras required long exposures, but Clara's hand is in Cole's and their shoulders are touching. She looks tired but proud. He looks protective and maybe a little awed, like he still can't quite believe she's his. Looking at that photograph, you can almost imagine the story. The blizzard, the rescue, the slow building of trust, the fight against Holbrook, the children, the hospital, the life they built together on the brutal, beautiful frontier. You can almost hear Clara's voice, sharp and competent, ordering someone to hold still while she stitched them up. Cole's quiet presence, solid as the Wyoming mountains, the sound of their children laughing, the creak of wagon wheels bringing patients to the hospital door. All of it gone now, faded into history, but not forgotten, never quite forgotten. Because stories like Clara's don't disappear. They lodge in the collective memory, reminding us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when circumstances demand it, that cruelty and injustice don't always win, that sometimes, against all odds, damaged people find each other and build something beautiful. The frontier is gone now, tamed and civilized, but the lessons Clara Mercer taught about courage and resilience and refusing to accept the limitations others place on you, those endure. They echo through the Wyoming wind, whisper through the halls of the hospital that bears her name, live in the work of every nurse she trained and every life she saved. Some people leave the world smaller than they found it. Clara Mercer left it larger, more just, more humane. And in the end, that's all any of us can hope to do. Build something that lasts, Love fiercely. Refuse to be destroyed. And when the time comes to let go, do it knowing you mattered, knowing you made a difference, knowing, as Clara did in those final moments with Cole's hand in hers, that your life meant something beyond survival, that you lived, really lived, and that was enough.